It's 6:03.
Okay.
I'm going to call to order our Rutland Select Board meeting. It's Thursday, August 25th, 2024. We're meeting in the Wood Studio behind 232 Main Street. This is our goals and objectives kind of brainstorming session. It's not a super formal meeting, so it's really just kind of to throw out ideas, get a direction to the board. Kind of similar to last year, how we had Austin and Tika compile everything after. We'll do that. We're also looking to set some, or get a direction for the TA goals and objectives as well this year. We, I believe, are on, I'm not sure if there's a Zoom.
No, we're not.
There's no Zoom, but we're being live streamed for local access as well as recorded for local access and YouTube and everything. We're airing. I don't think there's a flag here to start with the pledge. So we will get right into the first agenda item. I'd like to try to keep the meeting to about 2 hours if we can. Kind of do an hour-ish of select board and then save an hour-ish for TA. I don't think we'll need an hour for TA, so we go a little over with the select board, then that's okay. Again, I really view this as kind of a working idea session and not anything formal, very similar to last year. So we can start with the our 2025, fiscal year 2025 select board goals and objectives. I believe we had sent out earlier in the week kind of an update status of our 2024 goals and objectives and where we stand with those. We knew going into it that a lot of them were multi-year, multifaceted goals and objectives. And a lot of these couldn't have been done without staff support. So I really want to thank the board for getting behind them and empowering the staff to do work as well. So I think we had them kind of broken out last year. I didn't print anything because I was thinking I would get online. So we kind of had them broken out last year kind of as a financial kind of piece than a more personnel piece and everything, a relations piece, I think. So I'm happy to kind of, yeah.
You're talking about?
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you. I have a whole bunch of things open on my phone. So, yeah, we had investment in capital. Thank you, Harry. Improvement in staff morale, modernized town government, and continuation of modernizing town government. So that's about where we stand. Thank you. So I'm going to open it up for conversation from the board's perspective as kind of how last year's goals and objectives look, what you think as priorities looking forward. I think if we kind of look at investment in capital, I think we can kind of maybe start there and see if there's any additional pieces or whatever. How does the board feel with investment in capital? Is that still a priority? Is there pieces that need additional attention? Projects? Yeah, I mean, is the board always right? Like, and I think a lot of what we've heard and realized, I think, for the past year is that the town infrastructure, the town buildings really need some significant attention from town hall annex as well as public safety, and realizing those space considerations. I believe we have a few different options already, kind of draft potential plans and everything for different scenarios, but in my mind, we need to make a commitment to fund the engineering piece of it, right, Austin, and then make the commitment that we're going to sell it however we're going to fund the actual projects. I think historically we've been, not the board, select board, iterations of the select board have been good about realizing what needs to be done and then seeing the price tag and never doing anything. So I think that's my personal.
What does Weston and Sampson say? I mean, we had a thing done a couple of years ago in Iran
Yeah.
that did that, and they updated it, or they came out with a whole new plan?
No, so the board, as you'll recall, allocated, I'm going to round up and say $40,000 from ARPA to fund a space needs analysis and feasibility study for town hall annex, community/senior center, and dispatch. So kind of four buildings, which include many departments. That is still ongoing with Weston and Sampson. They prepared a draft space needs matrix after interviewing with town staff taking the four buildings. And they have also created a few sort of draft concept designs based off of those, based off of that matrix. So I think, to be honest, I don't think they've taken a look at the facilities plan and looked at upgrades because they didn't care, because they were just strictly looking at what is set based off of interviews, and then developed proposed renovations, additions, new buildings for respective developments.
I think also when the study was done with Ron, it was a current needs, what the current needs of the buildings were, and not any opportunity for growth or looking kind of towards
Since
growth.
getting the buildings in good condition.
Right, and I think kind of the Weston Sampson piece is trying to figure out, based on the size of the community now and projected future growth, what the space needs are and how best to utilize the existing space there.
What was it was town hall, community center, dispatch, what was the fourth?
Town hall, I also named the annex as a building, but community/senior center and regional dispatch.
Did that, was there any process getting to location of the building?
So it looked at existing buildings and ways to either modify the space, renovate, additions. The only new building, for example, is the dispatch. Ultimately, it's a space needs and kind of a feasibility study, so it looked at essentially departments. You could essentially take that matrix and those concepts and put them anywhere. So you could put them on the Heights property, for example, or any other town land that you saw was suitable. But you would kind of do that through the design process.
Okay.
So for example, if the board as a goal said, committing to advancing into the design phase for that project, that's kind of where you would get into the little bit more specific. So what you'll see when that study is in final draft form and presented to you folks, you'll quite literally just see concepts. It's not going to show you what the building looks like from an exterior, no 3D modeling. It's just kind of floor plans, if you will, and then you'll see the space needs features.
So I'm going to write down for consideration. This again is not anything similar to last year's consideration. We can talk it out, cross it out as we just continue discussion, add to it, whatever, and then ask some staff support to kind of collate it for us. But I think the kind of next logical step, we already allocated that money through ARPA for the space and kind of design, initial design, look at, I don't want to say design, but kind of
Design concepts.
Design concept, and then to move forward with actual design and kind of pre-engineering almost, or?
Well, depending on, I think, how far you want to go with it, you could quite literally fund the design of the project. Yeah. Just estimating cost for that would be about $1 million for design.
Kind of like the fire station.
Oh, so and also just so you'll know, the study will also include design and estimated construction costs of that project as well. So you have a really good picture of, so you can actually go to town meeting or just anyone and say, this is roughly ballpark what we're thinking for this facility.
Is that all facilities? I think the schools too, with the issue we got coming up.
No, so that study, to be clear, was just for those 4 buildings that we discussed.
Just for 4.
That
I thought
does
it
bring
was-
up a good point though, Harry, about the school.
Yeah, I worry about that because, I mean, we're talking, I don't know, 10, 12 million, 20 million to build a school. And we don't know what the proposal is, looking at growth rates of students going forward. That kind of scares me, because that's not something we can plan for 20 years down the road.
So the school's an interesting piece, right? So that study that I forwarded to you, which was a product of Central Mass Planning Commission, you know, ballpark estimated us about 150 students in another 10 years. I think it's gonna be a lot more than that, right? So we could do as best as we can to plan and put that into how many students are gonna be able to fit into our existing buildings. Does that fit into an MSBA project? I certainly think that working with Capital, CIPC, and the school district to identify, you know, probably essentially doing the same thing for our existing schools and saying, you know, how does this fit with some of the data that they provided?
See,
You know, but certainly what we have for capital needs is pretty much how do we get the buildings that we have back in good condition. It's certainly not a growth.
no, but my concern is, you know, we talk about how much tax levy, how much borrowing can we do? And now we're looking ahead at 3, 4, 5 years, all of a sudden, we get another huge project
Yeah.
that we have to fund.
Yeah.
And we've got no tax levy, we got no borrowing unless we can control it.
I think also it might take some creative, I think the schools definitely, and I'll write down school considerations under this for sure. I think in some ways Rutland is fortunate because we have the 3 schools, and it might take some reimagining of the division of those 3 schools, but I think that at least some of the schools have capacity to take on more students. How that would look, I'm not sure. I'm thinking specifically of Glenwood. Not that it's not going to need work, but that I don't know that it's emergent for a new building, emergent because there's capacity there. But it's going to be kind of reimagining the current setup from a K through 2 and a 3 through 5 and a 6 through 8. It might need to be reimagined. So
And for a school building project, you know, so within the next 5 years, we would have already had to have been in the MSBA, Mass School Building Authority pipeline, probably 5 years ago. Those projects take usually about 8 to 10 years to kind of go from, hey, I think we need to build a new school, go through the process, applying for it. It's quite a lengthy process with MSBA, just sort of the pre-application process is 2 to 3 years. Getting funding a design, actually going through the design process. It usually ends up being about I'm going to round up and say about a 10-year process, so.
Okay. So whenever we start, we're looking at.
Yeah, it takes a while.
I mean,
It takes a while. And that's if you decide to go with the MSBA, that's the best way, right?
Yeah.
You get a matching component to that, but
Okay.
it still takes a while. But
Just keep it in mind if it does take that long.
yeah,
You can start planning.
yeah, well, especially, I mean, looking at those growth rates, right? I mean, they're just estimates.
Right.
If it's looking like within the next 10 years, you're gonna be at capacity, do we look at a new school? Again, I think just maybe one of the goals, not just for building projects, but just overall coordination with the school district. I mean, are there ways that they can identify efficiencies? That was an intent of that study, that was phase 1, was to get the data, and then phase 2 was to identify ways to, you know, whether we're sharing facilities with our other member communities or consolidating our existing schools, things like that.
Should we start I don't even want to call it a process, but thinking now about where we're going in terms of the schools?
yeah, so
Is that what you?
I put beginning the school building, reimagining, visioning,
Okay.
and kind of reworking that into, I think, a little bit to Austin's point and kind of the conversation, the whole district we're a regional district, pre-K through 12, and so the fact that all the communities have their own elementary and middle schools at varying capacity levels is interesting. A lot of schools that are fully regional, or a lot of districts that are fully regional at a pre-K through K-12 level, have kids going to have all regional schools. So it's not like Rutland kids would only go to Rutland, or, you know, I think Acton Boxborough is an example,
Yeah, sure.
where they share. Obviously our district is a lot larger, but I think kind of as town looking at our current building space and trying to work continue to work a little bit more collaboratively with the district to get a sense as to the needs and everything. That we know Rutland and Holden are expected to have significant growth. Most of Holden schools, I think, are at capacity, but Princeton and Paxton are not at capacity, and Sterling has room for the most part, so.
Okay,
So that I put that there, but I think it's kind of, we know it's gonna be a longer term process, and if we think now or the next couple of years, we should try to start getting on the MSBA list or whatever.
yeah. I mean, what happens if we go to capacity in our schools? How close are we? That's why I'm thinking, start a process in there.
And that's, I mean, Holden had to fund a mobile classroom, so they have some trailers at Dawson, yeah. So that's what Holden had to do. So we're not there yet, but.
Which is interesting because we have a whole wing of Glenwood that could have easily absorbed those students, right? So that's like the kind of the challenge that I have with 13 schools across the district, 13 buildings across the district, and there is that reluctance to identify ways to be a little bit more efficient, and you know the amount of resources that Holden had to spend on temporary classrooms when we have a perfectly functional building, you know. So.
And we hear that sometimes at Naquag, they, depending on the year, are tighter at Naquag than other years, but we still have a whole empty wing at Glenwood. And so kind of, it's gonna take some selling because it's gonna be changed, whether we stay with it, just Rutland reimagining or the district reimagining. It's gonna be changed and it's gonna be hard, but I think being open to that and realizing that we have to put all of our options on the table because we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to throw at all of these different projects.
Yeah.
So. Capital kind of projects investment wise, are there other pieces that are, I know we have a list of capital improvement, like equipment and priorities and everything.
I'm gonna bring up one of Tom's favorites too, recreation.
Yeah.
I know, we've been talking a lot about how CPA can help with that. Obviously, the CPA is not in the picture yet, and it will still be some time if it does ever pass. But I think if we can do something to Tom's point of, I think having some sort of a facility that can be used for any age range, for, looking at what do we need in there, something that can be used as a standalone space for the rec department, where they can have the camps, classes, their own space where they don't have to get kicked out of the school, and not be able to have camp there because the school needs to start opening or they have to clean or something. But I know there's, a facility specific is not anything that we can use CPA funds for. So if there's something that we can do for consideration, just to have a little bit more of a space, whether they, again, if it includes indoor, not fields, but, well, I guess we could possibly do that, but pickleballs, courts, whatever.
Do most of the participants come from Rutland, or they come from outside also?
Most are,
I think they're mostly not,
Most are
yeah.
Rutland.
I think there's a couple of programs that I think we do partner with neighboring communities on.
Yeah.
For example, like basketball, I think has some Paxton.
Yeah, there's some crossover, yeah.
I do think with, and I'll write down, kind of an intentional recreation piece. I think in kind of the design of town building needs, there are two different options to create, allow space for dedicated recreation. Because I know that that's a consideration that has been a consideration of Tom's, and I think a number of us for a number of years.
I think one thing that may add on to Jen's point is maybe just some sort of a funding structure to maintain our current recreational assets like fields and obviously the pool is a major recreation asset. So that was actually one of the goals from a suggestion from members of staff was allocate I put commitment, but you could say resources to our existing recreational assets.
Yeah.
Now, the fields are not really a rec asset, they're a town asset, correct? So the town is responsible for those?
Yep.
Under that,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I have some ideas for that. Obviously, I think, some of our a lot of our recreational programs have user fees associated with that. So, you think a good practice is, maybe, and I'm just coming up with, for every $100, you take $10 and allocate that towards a recreational capital revolving fund. Build that up and you use that to kind of maintain, right? So, the Rutland Youth Soccer reached out this year and they asked for permission to do some tick treatment down on the field behind Glenwood. We said yes. You could think that maybe in future years, maybe the town could participate in some respects to assist with that, right? Because
increase in numbers and that sort of thing. This year I had occasion to attend Wachusett Regional graduation as well as Central Cree Middle, okay? And so Wachusett Regional graduation was 880 and my nephew's son was number 3, so I sat through 879 more names. And the same thing happened with his daughter, said she was number 5, and I sat through 83 more names. So I mean, we see this evolution in the number of students that are being processed through these schools, and wow, okay. Because when I taught school, 179 or 181 kids graduated was a lot. Not anymore.
How many students participate in recreation? Now, we're dividing that into 2, one's safe place, one's recreation, correct?
yeah.
Or do we lump them together for the number of students?
No, I think they're separated separately,
And I want to be careful because recreation used to run a lot of adult classes,
Right.
evening classes, and they have no space to do that anymore. So they no longer are able to do that. and
They don't have space for that?
Correct.
Okay.
So they used to run them out of the building on Glenwood, and they no longer have access to that building. So there's no space. So there was a decent number of adult participants, seniors and non-seniors, that participated in those activities. So I want to just be mindful. I think by default, most of us, when we hear recreation, we default to the children, but really recreation is all encompassing.
So that was like adult basketball, volleyball, for
So-
that type of stuff?
Could be leagues, yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things that's
Pickleball.
growing is crazy is pickleball.
Pickleball,
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
growing
But some
like
of it was
crazy.
even like exercise classes, Zumba, yoga, aerobics, and yeah, there's a huge interest in adult basketball leagues. I know that there's some adult softball leagues around the community, around surrounding communities and everything. So I just want to be mindful, that I think by nature, all of us think recreation and think kids, but it's really, recreation is birth to death.
And I think it would be huge for us because, it's not like Worcester's super far away, but it would be really nice to have something right here that you could go do some of those and not have to spend
Yep.
an hour each way, or not each way, but.
See, in my funny way, I look at this and say, I'm for putting up this beautiful rec building, this beautiful soccer, because I want to make money off of it. I want these other leagues, these other ones to rent it out so we can make some money on it.
And here,
That then becomes a focal point here
Yes.
in Rutland for
Yes.
business.
Yep.
I was gonna
So
say,
that's-
and it brings in, participation to local restaurants.
Yep.
Right.
It's a sustainable, and we have the local option for meals tax, so then that's additional revenue into town on the meals tax side as well. It promotes the local business development, so.
Well, I guess on that front, just to add to that, there is I think the municipal component of developing something like this, but also is there a willingness to try to attract private industry? So you think of like the soccer side and Pax, I don't know if you've driven by there, but it's absolute insanity. And especially now they added a brewery.
With all those fields out there you're talking about?
No, it's,
Where
the Dunkin'
Paxton Sports
Donuts
Center used to be?
Yeah.
in Paxton.
Oh, it's in the
behind
back there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
They've redone it all, they put a new field up top.
yeah.
It's-
Game On in Fitchburg is also a brand new development that has
Yep,
thousands of people probably every weekend there.
There are companies out there who kind of do this for a living. They come in and they'll build a huge municipal facility. I don't know what their ask is, but that's a long-term approach.
Probably a tax deal, but,
Huh?
probably a tax deal.
At least that probably, could be
Right.
concession deals, I don't know. But to bring that kind of money into town,
Yeah.
So as far as like a funding question for just thinking conceptually, what are some possible locations, plans, designs? Is that something where if we could, even though it's municipal, would we be able to consider funding that out of the rec programs?
I think you'd have to look at the cost structure to make sure, obviously, that they're covering the costs of their program,
Right,
staff,
right.
things like that, but,
I thought we said at one point they had a pretty healthy,
yeah, they do really well. I think because their enrollment
Yeah.
is growing like crazy.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, they end up being a kind of a positive, but, obviously, if there's an interest to, kind of take a portion of that and allocate it towards capital, we just want to make sure that they're still healthy.
oh, yeah, absolutely, I wouldn't want to put them in a bad position.
Yeah, but
And maybe it can be an ask that they contribute
Yeah,
some.
contribute something.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's one thing that years ago capital started looking at was, and we never really approached it because we weren't at the level that we could do buildings and stuff like that, we just didn't have that. But looking at a piece of property that is big enough, have you been out to the New England Sports Center out in Westboro?
Yeah.
Or Northborough?
Yeah.
That's what something I envision around here, but not in a National League type focus.
Yeah.
Something that, I mean, my grandson plays hockey, he's playing at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
I have soccer that they're traveling to Methuen because they can't get teams to come here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at and saying, if we had a piece of property available that's big enough that, and we had a private municipal partnership, that's a gold mine.
Along with that, I think depending on how that piece comes out, is probably looking to expand the recreation department as an entirety. Right now, I think we have a part-time recreation director, classified as part-time. I think in the summer, she's mostly full-time, and then throughout the year, back down to part, am I speaking correctly?
Absolutely.
But I think that if we're looking to expand the recreation piece, no matter what, I think we need to also realize that that is likely going to come with a staff expansion also.
To Gary's point, if we can pull in enough
Right,
money
to bring
versus
money.
making more profits, then,
Right.
that leads to being able to hire more
The job
staff.
of rec is to break even, not to break profit. but
Right.
That's where you rely on that private partnership. That, if they could pay $150,000, $200,000 a year on property taxes for the land or something, or the income, we get 3% on $1 million a year. That's where it starts to make feasibility sense.
What do you think, I think municipal governments aren't usually in the best interest of being a real estate developer, so, if
Exactly.
you're contracting with a, sports development company to develop the facility and maybe
Yeah.
a deal with the town to be the operators of the facility. Things like that.
And I think we had directed the town administrator last year to put out kind of some requests for interest, and I think that there's ongoing considerations, and it's still kind of open for a recreation specific, but if we make it kind of a specific goal this year, then that puts a little bit more teeth behind it, and shows that we, as a board, are serious about making those longer term commitments, because, like I said, everything's gonna have an expense, but we have to,
This is, if we do this, even say the next 5 years, this is a long-term commitment to the town.
Right.
Sports are not gonna go away.
Right.
People are gonna pay good money. I mean, if you're gonna pay $300 for a pair of Jordans, you're gonna pay to get your son to go sports somewhere, a daughter to go sports somewhere.
Well, and to Paul's point, the schools are just growing. This town it's just the new families that are coming in. I just had 5 houses in my neighborhood turn over in the last year alone, and they're all the next generation of kids coming in. That's what's coming in now. This is not
I have this
something that will
couple
not
of-
have unused. So,
I have this couple live across from me, and they got a kid, I think, he plays, he's in the basketball. And we talk, and he says, I love Rutland. I mean, the sports we can do here in the leagues is great. So, I mean, I love to pull from Holden, I love to pull from Boston area, in that area, for having a facility that is top ranked.
Yeah.
You know, that would compete with, not compete with New England, but it'd be kind of at that level.
I think it would be good.
So, it's a long term.
Yeah.
I think business in this town is growing because I've had breakfast at the Maple Avenue here for a couple of mornings, and the number of vehicles that go through that have Rutland, Mass on their sides, you know, it surprised me, actually. I didn't think there was that many businesses running through the town, but there is. Yeah. So, you know.
We have, for capital kind of investment projects, we have kind of a commitment to fund the design of the town building needs after we see the kind of conceptual design. Beginning the school building reimagining visioning piece and kind of seriously looking at what, taking the initial study and moving it forward with the district hopefully in hand. And then a recreation focus, looking at building space, fund recreation spaces, fields, pool, etc. Municipal in or public, private in or private only. And also with that comes the staff considerations and expansions. Just that's not necessarily a specific, like the staff piece isn't necessarily capital, but we need to be mindful that as we are looking at, if we're making a commitment to recreation, that's likely going to come with staff. I think also kind of hand in hand with recreation is the is a senior center piece, because I think the building on Glenwood, whether that's the most ideal, and again, I think that there are considerations in the funding, the design, town building design piece to reimagine that, but whether the space, the building at Glenwood is best suited to continue to invest significant money into for the seniors' need, or if it can be reimagined somehow, I think.
Just a question on reimagining it. Holden has their own beautiful facility. What about the other towns like Barry, Ocam?
So Ocam is the basement of town hall, quite literally.
I mean, they don't have anything sophisticated at all.
What does Hubbardston have? Because I know Hubbardston draws a lot of Rutland
Hubbardston
folks.
is shared in the same building as town offices, police department, so they each sort of have a corner of that building. I think there's some changes coming to Hubbardston that will increase that space available, but nothing really compares to Holden.
I was thinking more the district type of senior center,
Yeah.
where maybe we can apply for grants, we get a special thing, having us as a, I mean, we're doing a lot of stuff in this town on a district level type of thing, or regional level, I mean, not
Yeah.
district level. That would be something that would be, for a small town like us, we're not Holden, that maybe pulling those others in, having transportation.
Well, our current senior center, I will say, I will give credit to some of the programming that's offered. You know, you mentioned OCAM, we actually have a significant amount of folks from OCAM that come for the, the morning dance Pilates, whatever it's called, class. So simply because it's not offered really there. So some of the programs that we offer here are a little more extensive than our partners. So just one thing I can add, just overall to, I guess we can call it capital projects and investment, but just overall facilities. One thing that I think has been glaring in my first year and a half here is we really don't have a committed resources to facilities maintenance, if you will. So what I would suggest or propose is to consider creation of a facilities division in DPW. Obviously there's some work that would need to be done with our existing DPW union, things like that, to modify the structure of it. But we've got a highway division, we have water, sewer, stormwater. I really do think that there's a need to have some sort of a dedicated facilities division. Candidly right now they're shared with highway, so I feel bad when our Mark, essentially our facilities guy, he'll be installing an AC and then he'll get a call and he's got to go do a water main break or a sewer break. So we really don't have committed resources to facilities maintenance, but also I think we do have some challenges from a custodial perspective, so something to consider, because I do think that there's just, not only do we need to modernize these facilities, but just making sure they're clean and keeping up to date with.
It is one of the three-legged stools, police, fire, and DPW.
Yeah.
Those are our three keys in town. That's what
And I
keeps us running.
We have very capable people able to take care of our facilities, but allowing them to allocate dedicated time to that work so that things, ideally, we get in a place that we're doing the routine maintenance and not just an emergency fix or having it get so bad that then it becomes a capital expense. So I think kind of given the age and stage of our buildings, as well as if we are looking to fund new space or improved space or whatever, that we're making the commitment on the town side that we're gonna take care of those buildings. Because that's something we hear, or I hear a lot, is why are you gonna build new buildings, you don't take care of the ones that we don't have. And that can turn into a vicious cycle because
I think we end up being, kind of reactive on a lot of our just overall normal building issues, so, for the longest time, one of the sinks in the library wasn't producing hot water. And all it took was, when Mark got back from leave, he was told about the issue, went up in the ceiling and he realized that the hot water heater was turned off. Simple things like that, dedicated, committed resources every day to just going through the buildings and, fixing some things. I think that take pride a little bit in the investment, especially if we're gonna ask possibly for the community to invest in renovating or creating new facilities. I think, it's great, you can spend all the money up front creating a building, but you also need kind of a maintenance plan and allocate resources to be able to achieve that plan too.
And I would also push a little bit, and maybe this isn't necessarily under facilities specifically, but looking at if there is new construction work or renovations being done, that it's done properly. I think what we've learned kind of with all the roof issues and everything is a lot of what had been done wasn't maybe done to the best, and that's why we've continued to have to throw money into fixes that should have been done from the start of construction. So if there's dedicated people in person, kind of segueing, maybe this is kind of segueing into a staff kind of perspective, but I think also there could be value to looking at like a town engineer or something, not always having to go to Weston and Sampson, but having someone in-house that is dedicated as a Rutland engineer to look at a lot of our engineering needs, and that's hired as that purpose and not as a DPW director and an engineer or something, because I think that there is value.
Good suggestion, do you feel that would be cost effective to the town?
Maybe.
I'm throwing this up from a capital perspective.
Yes.
In terms of, we've got these facilities, we're gonna be building things. Do we have to say, okay, we wanna build this, we're going to Weston and Sampson, they're coming back, we go back to them, we're coming back, we're going back to them.
Yeah. There's nothing better than getting that stamp from an architecture PE. We have so many projects, to our good friend, Mr. Canacchioli, his points about grants. I mean, we have so many ideas that are just not ready because we don't have the resources to contract with an outside engineer to get a project ready. We talk about road infrastructure, sidewalks, water, sewer, stormwater, that we essentially have to wait for our new budget year to reset so we can have money to be able to advance projects. I do think that there would be a kind of a return on investment there by allocating some of our existing resources to get a lot of these projects ready. And we're also just not paying the very healthy consulting rate.
And I think that there is a place definitely for consulting rate for some of the, if we push forward with a design, an actual design, I think that would warrant a consulting piece. But I think for some, some of the complete streets grants and everything, we could, if we had an in-house engineer that we could go to and say some of the water sewer stuff.
Right, when I say cost effective, I don't just mean from a salary perspective.
Yeah.
I mean from, we pay the guy, whatever, and we're gonna get $1 million in grants because we got plans ready
Yeah.
to do
Well,
things.
so I think that, ultimately, all these grants are competitive. I think it's just the point is we haven't been able to compete for a lot of these because we don't have projects that are ready.
Yeah.
That's the feedback that I've gotten in my prior experience, that's what I've gotten here, is that great ideas, just not ready. Come back when you have even a little bit more, or a fully stamped plan. Show that you've committed some resources to get this ready for our investments. So, ultimately it is once you press submit, hopefully there's good news.
Right.
But also I know that, when we're applying for earmarks or assistance from our state and federal, that's one of the questions that's on it is, can you achieve this in the year or 2 years that you have to spend the money? And unfortunately, when you say, well, we're gonna start designing it once you give us the grant, it's like, well, you're not gonna get that grant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do think that, I think we would be a little bit more competitive on a lot of things. Also, there's just some things that it's nice to have a technical eye on. When we were working through and we had a conservation agent, it was really nice from a technical perspective to have someone who has experience looking at infrastructure, working with our other land use departments to kind of place a technical eye and inform the rest of staff, and also our volunteer boards and commissions as well.
I can see, for example, when the fire station was done, had we had an engineer, it might have gotten a totally different review,
Yeah, maybe.
okay?
Yeah.
So when we're going for, and again, I'm looking at redoing a lot of stuff, we may be looking at school. Not that I'm for spending more money for somebody, but you can't get this stuff done without an expert eye on it. You can't rely on the guys that come in and say, we're gonna do this for 20 million for you, and then walk away, and then we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
That's not good for the town either.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, so, just so everyone can see, I'm not trying to be secretive.
Okay.
So, for staff, I said, consider town engineer. I moved DPW facilities division down, and rec and or COA expansion considerations, depending on how those directions, and this is probably a longer term mindfulness piece, but if we're looking to expand facilities and or programming, especially recreation, but even I think at this COA level, there's a lot that could be done there too. So that's what I have there. Another thing that, Austin, you mentioned the conservation agent, that pops into my head is I really think that there's value to having a conservation agent and or stormwater consultant, whether that's one position or two separate positions. And also, because that person, at least a conservation agent, would have to work very closely with Concom, ensuring that that's a workable relationship, because I think it's been fraught, the first iteration had been quite fraught, and when we have professional staff working with boards and commissions and committees, whether they're elected, we've had the challenge with the town planner and the planning board, just as everyone has been accustomed to learning how to work with staff, but being mindful that this is I would hope, a board objective to have a conservation and or stormwater employee, agent, and that's a priority of the board. But I don't know.
I can see that's important, but I guess I go back to the committees, and you look at stormwater. Do we have anybody that understands stormwater and understands what it is, that we don't have to hire a stormwater person? Do we have somebody that sits on the committee that understands what an agent does? Because, in my opinion, we spent a lot of money on payroll. We've hired a lot of people. We still have a long way to go, but I don't want to spend money on something when we need it really bad over here just to put something in place here. I want to see stuff that we really, really need to move this town forward.
So,
That's my
Austin,
concern.
you can maybe speak a little bit more. I think with the stormwater piece for sure, there's nobody really in-house that can do that with the stormwater utility funded and the state and federal mandates. I think that there's huge value to having a stormwater agent or I don't know what the official title would be also.
Who oversees that now?
Coordinator, I think.
I think historically it's been a public works responsibility and function. You know, one thing I've actually been doing a little bit of research on, because that's actually one of my goals, is to look at creating an engineering department to advance a lot of these initiatives. You know, I reference Shrewsbury a lot with their stormwater work, but I think they've done a fantastic job of, you know, many years ago, they stood up the utility, and since then they have accomplished a lot. And actually, the department that manages that in Shrewsbury is actually engineering and conservation. It's a unified department. So their town engineer also, in the beginning, served as the conservation agent and served as the technical expert to Concom. Because you think about stormwater, a lot of it is related to a lot of the work that conservation has purview over. So, you know, there may be some duplication there or overlap in responsibilities and interests. So, you know, maybe your engineer position could be funded through partially through the stormwater utility, and also can provide that technical expertise to land use board like Concom. So.
Do you think if we hired somebody, it could be done through the current fee for stormwater, or we would have to increase that again?
I think looking at some resources, you'll recall this is the first year that has a fully funded stormwater budget. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
A lot of that are purchase services that were assumed to go towards our outside engineer to help us with stormwater efforts. I think modifying that budget a bit, I think we could handle that. We also have Wetlands Protection Act funds that could go towards compliance, especially on the Concom side. So I think we can identify mixed funding sources.
I mean, Mike, we all heard about the stormwater fee.
Yeah.
So we know it's going to be 80 this year. You know, I just didn't want to see it go to 120 and then get the same feedback from the town again. So keeping within that, to me, that's reliable.
I do think there's a ramp up. Do I think that we'll get to 120? No. Yeah, I think where we are maybe.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Reserve the right to change that. I think we are doing a really good job already of catching up. There was a lot of catch up to do in the first couple of years. We were years behind on compliance. Weston and Sampson has done a lot to help us even in this first year with that, you know, the first budget. So, but again, if some of that is reporting or sampling, things like that, I mean, you know, some of that.
When I heard Sampson and Weston for that.
Right. Well, and you know, we've trained some of our DPW staff to be able to assist us with some of that sampling work and reporting. So, yeah, just back to the enterprise fund question. I think that we've probably ramped up, and I would imagine that that's probably going to be a stable budget for the next couple of years.
Okay.
And then the new stormwater permit comes out and triples our requirements.
And I think kind of, so I just put consider town engineer / stormwater / conservation, just to keep that kind of entirety open, and how that looks funding wise, resource wise, job description wise, I think also. But I do think that there's value to kind of keeping those considerations. And kind of segueing, I have a couple more staff things that I want the board to consider. I don't know, and I'm happy to hear from everyone else. Segueing down though, I think we as a board are going to have some work to do with stormwater rules and regs to make sure that that we're moving forward with those. We know that we need to be doing some more education and everything. So as a board, I think last year we made the commitment to focus on the bylaws, and I commend us for doing that. This year I kind of would like to see us look at policy. And we have, I think Tamika has found a number of old policies that exist. We did the financial policies and the personnel policies, which were huge. But I think that throughout the iterations and with the new bylaws in effect, there's probably some policies that we need to develop or look at again.
There's 42 of them total.
Yeah.
There's 42, and I think we've hit about 5 of them in the last year or so.
Okay,
So, and I think that throughout, even some considerations from legal counsel and everything, there's, needs to look at some existing ones, maybe consider creating additional ones based on current or recently settled court cases and everything as well. So that's kind of, I'll put that down for like board-specific priorities, because a lot of this I think is board-specific, but it's gonna need a lot of staff support, and it's almost empowering staff to do this work, as well as we are coming together as a united front when we're talking to people about it and seeing that there's values to whatever we decide on. Coming back to staff, I think I would like to consider, and it's not specifically staff, it's more of a staff HR piece, considering to see that HR piece continuing to grow, and really do the like the annual reviews and goal settings with the department heads as well, and then empowering the department heads to do that with their employees as well, so that.
I'm not sure what I'm hearing, so maybe.
So I think we did a review of the town administrator,
Yeah.
the board did. We're doing goal setting this, hopefully tonight, or draft goal setting with the town administrator for tonight, for this upcoming, for the next 9 months or so. But I think department heads haven't had reviews, other town employees haven't had reviews. And so continuing to move towards that, because there's been a lot of this past year, I think a lot of HR work has been done looking at job descriptions, figuring out job functions, working on pay and everything, and I would like to continue to see that piece move forward, the HR commitment piece, because I think HR is one of those pieces that, and I said it before, at MMA, everybody says HR is kind of your first line of risk reduction when it comes to risk in town, and so it's one of those pieces that the public doesn't see a lot of. We don't necessarily see a lot of because it's personnel and it gets messy. But if we can continue with the the personnel policies that we have, continuing to build off those, follow those, and provide that feedback. As an employee, I like having that yearly review, that feedback piece.
How does that work? Let's take DPW as an example. How does that work when you have a union now? And you want that person to review the employees, and now you're reviewing the department head. Does that make it more challenging for the department head that, how do you say this, that your review has to be structured in a different way because now we have a union?
So I think the union piece in terms of performance reviews really doesn't matter, because as you know, collective bargaining agreements really cover salaries and benefits.
Right.
Doesn't really have anything related to performance other than disciplinary and grievance procedure language. But I think a good practice for any organization is probably right around now or maybe a little bit sooner, you develop goals for the upcoming year for all the employees.
Okay.
And then towards the end of the year, fiscal year, you sit down and you talk about how's the year been. Let's take a look at your goals. What's gone well, what hasn't gone well. Kind of like what you guys did with me a couple of months ago. So, I think there would be an expectation, actually I think it's in the personnel policies that you folks adopted, is to follow that process. So the department head would be responsible for doing that with their respective employees. And then, I, for example, would be with folks that I'm responsible for. And same thing for you guys, right? So you not only have, sorry, Tanika, you not only have me as an employee, you also have, for example, you have fire chief that's appointed by general law, you guys, right? So more than just the TA, right? There's a little bit of a responsibility on you guys to also review, not just me, but your other employees that you're responsible for.
That's a good point. We historically have never, ever reviewed the fire chief, as far as I know. And so the fire chief, because the chief is a strong chief, reports directly to the board and not the administrator. So that would be another piece that the board then would be looking at and
So
considering.
we have no set of criteria to evaluate the fire chief at this point?
I am not aware of any. We, in the years that I've been on the board, we've never done anything with the fire chief. We weren't always even good about doing anything with the town administrator, so
Yeah.
that's, you know, and I think that that's one of those pieces that with guidance from HR is easier to do because you want to make sure it's objective and kind of industry standard wise, and because it's their careers also. Tamika, did you have something?
I was just going to ask just a little question, kind of similar to Harry's point about the unions and the performance reviews. I know for like non-union employees, their wage increase is going to be tied to their performance. So how does that work with a union where essentially their wages are guaranteed to increase, but then what if they get a bad review? Do you know what I mean? I'm
Yes.
just curious how that
So
works.
that's something I think we'll have to cover in kind of the collective bargaining process. So the new union that was formed, the Clarity Union, does have language that ties successful performance review to a wage increase. Something I think obviously if that's what the board is interested in pursuing with our other collective bargaining units, we'll do that. So I think consistency is nice, right? But I hate to
What do you
treat.
think about that?
Oh, I absolutely agree that outside of your COLA increases, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree that any additional salary increase should be tied to performance.
Right.
I can't tell you, even in my job, how much dead weight is there in still getting raises. I don't know how they let that happen. I think that's just a separate issue in my perspective.
Well, that
But-
was rooted in, I think it was rooted in, you know, some of the challenges that I think some of our non-union staff have had over the past couple of years
Yeah.
is they kind of felt like they'd been left behind.
Yeah.
So I think this was a nice tool that you guys adopted to try to reward the non-union staff with, hey, you're doing a really good job. Not only are you gonna get your COLA, but based upon a successful review, get a little bit more too.
And so maybe, so right now I have just under HR kind of goals and objectives, reviews, job descriptions, salaries, but also maybe, I think most of our union contracts were recently renegotiated, but spending time in the next couple of years looking at those and the consideration, you know, some of the considerations across the board.
What we want to bring to the table.
Yeah, you know, that I find is one of the tough issues because one side comes to the table and they want the amount of gold. The other side wants to give them lead, you know, in terms of non-valuable asset, you know? And there's got to be a compromise in between, and I've always thought that if you come here, everybody has in their mind, this is what I'm going to give you, and this is what I'm willing to give up. And the question is, how do we really make that work? Because most of the unions in this state bring a list of 27 items and they get 25. We come there with a list that we want 15 and we get one. So I'm trying to figure out how, as a board, to your point, looking at the contracts and saying, the town can't support this, this doesn't, what else can we do? What else are you willing to give up if you want this type of thing? Not to be hard, but, you know, there's only a certain limit. It's like what you know, well, here's our budget, take it or else, type of thing. It's gotta be, so maybe that's where
I think so.
HR can help us in that.
Well, we kind of, I mean, I think it's important to meet with the board before we do any session. I think that's what we've been doing is, before we start negotiating, you know, what are the interests, what do you want? What are your, you know, do not go beyonds, if you will. There's a word for that, but I can't think of it. And we've done that a little bit, right? There's, one of the unions was willing to give up the sick incentive time, which is a huge accrued liability, in lieu of some, what we viewed as modest changes, actually, from a cost structure perspective. So I think, at the end of the day, negotiating is about the relationship that you have with the employees. So I also think it's important to pursue other initiatives throughout the year to make sure that those employees feel valued. So you're not sitting at the table, and because you don't have a good relationship with them, it's all ready adversarial. So-
Yeah, and that's what you don't want. You don't want that. You want something where people come in with common sense
Yeah.
and say, I know where you stand, I know what we can get, I know what we can.
Well, that's, I think we're candid, especially, we're not flush with resources, right? So, and I think all of our employees know that.
And I think even some of the kind of empowering the departments, like I know dispatch has been doing a really good job with kind of their fun week, and like spirit weeks almost and everything, trying to increase employee morale, not just in dispatch and public safety, but they try to include all of town buildings. I think we know that there were hard feelings around the benefits package that the staff kind of felt that their hand was forced on a few years ago. And so I think that listening to those, HR listening to those and trying to work with, okay, what isn't working and what is, and as we're finishing out this contract, what can we look towards that might be better? So providing that open communication, and it's not just a salary, but we have to be mindful of whether it's a flexible work schedule. I think, maybe we can do a little bit more incentive for town employees if they're utilizing recreation or COA staff or opportunities.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean, so that there's a little bit more Rutland specific benefits also.
I mean, in some things, we have no control. If the state fire marshal or the state fire department comes down and says, this is new policy, this is new policy. We can't change it, there's not much we can, basically law, so to speak. So there's where we're handcuffed and things like that. We'd like you to work 4 days a week. Well, we can't, because fire marshal says we work 3. That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's try to do that. So it is difficult, yeah, we don't want it to be that way.
Austin, and I'll ask you because you're there also, but from a staff perspective, I know we kind of tried to really improve employee morale this year, work towards that. I think a lot of the initiatives were successful. We started the Employee of the Year award, and I think have been mindful of listening to staff and what their concerns are and trying to know that it's not an immediate fix, but that we're willing to have the conversation and work towards. Is there anything this year that you think the board can kind of support and get behind to continue staff feeling?
I would deal with the steward, and he would often give me a very fair assessment of who, what, where, and when. Okay, now I don't know that they have a steward here, but I always felt I got a fair assessment out of this person about what was going on and who was doing what.
Yeah, to your question, I think Tamika had a great idea. We talked about this a little bit earlier today, about the rec stuff.
Oh, okay. So
You're on.
myself and I've heard from some other staff members who, like me, have younger children, that it might be nice to have some sort of financial benefit when our kids are enrolled in town programs. I know for me that it would actually cost more money to have my kids in a program if I was to stay at work longer, so it doesn't offset itself. And then another suggestion that was brought up by an employee was having the option to have a certain amount of your paycheck allocated every couple of weeks that you could put aside to maybe pay for before and after school care or the summer camp program in advance of knowing that that's coming up. I think financially that would
easier
help the staff. Yeah. Yep.
A discount for.
Yeah. So,
Maybe we do a, what is 10 to 10%?
It's 10% discount for the summer program, the camp. But as far as I know, there is no discount for the before and after school care program.
I thought it was a great idea.
Are we talking same place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So staff gets discounts, kind of recreation safe place. I'm gonna just put et cetera in case there's any other programming that kind of is developed because, but then also I think, I don't know if it would be a specific dependent care account or if it's something that would just kind of be set up internally. I'm not sure, but I'll write down dependent care account. I'm not sure if that's currently an option. I know that similar to like flex spending, there is a,
Exactly, yeah, that's what we were thinking, kind of like how you do that, and then you just have that certain amount that's set aside, because then it's, pre-tax, and then you have that money.
this is just a consideration for going forward. Instead of doing a staff discount, potentially for those, if a dependent care account were to be set up or something, I'm not sure municipal-wise if there's an avenue to do this, but anyone who participates in a dependent care account, because it can also be for adult dependent care, that the town would contribute X number of dollars into a dependent care account if you set it up or something. I'm not sure if the municipal-wise that's an option, and that I would imagine would be in lieu of discounts, but if you're setting up a dependent care account that way, it's whether you're using a home daycare or an adult care facility or something. If you have a dependent care account, maybe the town puts it, I don't have a dollar number in my head or anything, but.
Because I was thinking in terms of, like productivity, like having that, a little bit of a financial relief for the employees could mean that they could potentially be working more. Like I know for me, it would actually be more expensive for me to work longer hours because I have to offset it with the after-school care.
If
Whereas
it
if
means
there
you're
was,
gonna be the secretary of the CIPC, I'm for it.
I understand, when I had my first kid, I was like, can I go part-time? And it was not worth it.
So I think from a dependent care account piece, that's kind of,
I think your question just overall, but I think employee morale, there's definitely, I think some initiatives we tried to start up, just overall, just being more cognizant of employees' impact and the work that they do and recognize them, whether it's the employee of the year or through some of the work on social media. I think there's definitely a lot more work to do just to recognize. We had we used some leftover funds and did an employee gift with some of the apparel just to try to recognize and give some sort of appreciation. We continue to do the annual kind of a holiday party get together for people around Christmas time. I'd like to expand on those and just to continue to show
one thing,
people, because it's a tough job. I mean, especially people put long hours in, and especially dealing with the public, they maybe don't always feel appreciated. So I'd like to continue to build on
I know
those
one thing,
initiatives.
like UMass, like that they do for us is like once a summer, they'll have like a food truck festival and they'll invite a few food trucks and you go up and it's free. You get like your lunch for free essentially, or they'll have like an ice cream social and it's like
Where is this?
at the medical school where I work.
Oh.
And so, or it might be, then they might do an ice cream social and it's, everybody has free ice cream or whatever. So something along, whether it's an employee lunch and just being mindful that everybody has different work schedules, especially, DPW and public safety might be out around town and not necessarily able to be at a sit-down place at noon or something.
The town of Hubbardston does, I think the town administrator does a great job. He's really creative on some initiatives, but also works with the board. So one of the board members, once a month, does, serves people lunch, says come through during this time period, and she's handing out food to people and serves people lunch. So I think it also shows from a board perspective that you're also aware and you appreciate the work that they do, and it's easy. I mean, that's something that we can communicate to people. Hey, Selectman Seckman is going to be around today and just going to hand out ice cream to people from noon to 1 or something. So things like that I think are really easy wins, and I think go a long way with employee and recognizing the work that they do.
one other thing I was going to suggest is maybe from like an HR perspective, doing like a smile file kind of thing, where I think a lot of times we associate our personnel files with like, if something bad happens, they're going to put it in your file. And I think sometimes people are very humble and they don't want to necessarily share their wins or the compliments. But maybe if we encourage like a smile file folder and say, hey, if you get a nice email or if you get a nice compliment from somebody, we've added a share a compliment option to the website. Getting in the habit of sending that to the HR director so that they can add that to your file, and maybe, you know, if you get to a certain number of positive things in your smile file, you get an Amazon gift card or something like that.
Or like
you know,
a gift card to Coffee Land or Don's or
Yes.
Marketplace, you know, one of the local
Yeah,
places
that's
or
a good,
something.
yep.
I think I mentioned that, my company does something very similar, they call it high fives.
Look
And
at that.
it's, they leave it out to customers too, so customers have a way that they can submit who that person is and leave comments on their experience, and of course in this case it's the good experiences, so,
Yeah.
you know, what they wanna recognize them for. And I think I mentioned something at some point, just, can we have a spot on our website where if you just had a great experience with somebody, you can submit.
We
Yeah,
do.
we have that,
It's
yeah.
called, it's called Share a Compliment, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
under the residents tab, and when we first launched the website, we let folks know it was there, and we ended up getting like 3 or 4 people that submitted things, so every once in a while, like once a quarter, I like to do a social media post where I
Okay.
say, hey, don't forget, this button's here
That's
if you've
there.
had a great experience,
Okay.
and then those are the kind of things we can
Yeah.
put in people's folders, or sometimes you get a nice email from somebody
Yeah.
saying, hey, so-and-so was super helpful,
Yeah.
and it's just nice to be able to
Absolutely.
add that.
What about even leaving like little cards,
I was gonna say, like,
boxes
compliment
around,
boxes
around the town clerk, because people go up there all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't necessarily use the internet, so leave them a handwritten note that you can put in a file or
Yeah.
share with somebody that might be good.
Good.
Leave those around town.
You guys are so smart. I love that idea.
But yeah, I like those, and, you know, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you do get one of those that comes through,
Yeah.
it really does.
And sometimes you feel uncomfortable, like
Yeah.
if you send it, you're
Yeah.
not humble, you know what I mean? So maybe if there was a reason to say like,
Yes.
no, we want to see it,
We want
so
to see
please
it.
send it to us, you
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely.
So I put for employee morale, I didn't write everything down, but I wrote like compliment box, smile file, high five. But I think kind of continuing to expand upon the different activities as, you know, there's not that it is a significant hit to the budget, but as there's funds available to keep our employees, you know, I think employee morale is huge, and the happier employees, are you putting your sunglasses on? I know whether I do.
Like, I know, the sun just came
The
out.
golden
then.
hour.
Yep. Is that, are you comfortable kind of with employee morale and then knowing that kind of continuing?
Yeah.
And then I just started, under board, I put policy and just that's a big priority. I don't know, kind of, as a general from all of you, what other pieces you'd like to see the board focus on?
I wouldn't mind making a little bit more prominent the whole town charter process. I know we keep talking about it, I'm pretty sure there's still an open article out there for something, but actually making forward progress on establishing a committee to start really moving forward with that.
I mean, the article is out there, and I think that was one of our objectives or goals last year, was to kind of look at that, and I think unfortunately, the bylaw piece took precedent for that.
Yeah.
But now that the bylaws are accepted and can provide some basis potentially provide some basis for a charter, and I think that would probably, Austin, I would imagine, reach out to the Collins Center, and I think there's a couple other groups that do it to see what their processes
Yeah. Well, I
look
think-
like and everything.
I think it probably for you guys, I think it would start, maybe dictate the path, because there's several paths that you can choose to go through the charter process, and then from there you can say, you know, we think, and I'm just going to use the Collins Center as an example, we've chosen this path, we're going to work with the Collins Center to steer that and ultimately develop something for you. So, you know, maybe a discussion at a board meeting this year about what do we think about the process, and we can spell out for you the different paths that
I
are.
was gonna say, I'm gonna definitely need some help on what are the different options.
Yeah, Gardner just went
What
through
do
it.
we need to do, yeah.
It is, yeah. Gardner just went through it. It was interesting. Their charter they've had a charter since like the early 1900s, and it hasn't been amended since the early 1900s. So a lot of it was just modifying or modernizing some things. But there's a couple of different paths there.
in response to your question for the board, are we still going to issue leases? Because that's a big issue for me. And that, from a lease perspective, I like to look at all the leases. I want to make sure the town is being treated fairly on those.
So,
And there are some things that I've read in the leases that actually are being broken. So a lease, looking at all the leases, if we're going to continue to do leases, because it really is tough. You know, when I have people come up to me and say, oh, he's getting that lease, how much are we making on it? I say, well, we're not. Well, how come we're not making any money on this? So that's an issue for me to look at, or other leases.
so I don't know that we have any that are due super soon. We did the grant agreement with, working through the grant agreement with the Historical Society that I think would be 3 years at the Woodhouse, is that?
Yeah.
And then I don't remember how long is left on, fire and, the old fire station and Marshfield. And then I know that there's generally Hayfield leases and everything also.
I know the soccer has a lease too.
They haven't done anything with it though.
Yeah. Yeah, for the start for those.
Yeah.
So I wrote down leases.
But I'd like to review those to see if there's something we can change for the future. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair conversation, just kind of the direction moving forward with town property that currently is in lease.
Right.
Sounds like a policy. Considerations for leasing.
Yeah. Mika, could you draft up some issues about what we need to know since you don't know anything else?
Hang on.
But I think it's interesting because there's, certainly, we have had a challenging time just tracking down a lot of documents related to some of our town contracts and lease agreements with folks. So I think the more recent ones like the fire brigade and the Little League, we have those, but some older ones, really no records. So we have
I mean, some of them are viable. You know, to me, if you lease something to somebody and they spend money on that, their own money to do something, well, that's giving back to the town. But if you lease something to somebody that you get nothing in return for, that's really a bad option financially for the town. Not a good issue, particularly where when a town owns property, it's supposed to be for the use of the people of the town. So I have a conflict there, and that's why I like to review some of the leases.
Well, it's interesting because also the concept of towns being landlords is also something that, from a larger perspective, is that something that the board and the community wants to consider.
Right.
I think we have fairly good relationships with our current tenants, but
We want to take on any more.
yeah, do you want to keep doing that, or are there opportunities that are advantageous not only to the town, but also to the current tenant, that maybe they have more flexibility with not being subject to the town being a landlord.
Right.
Something maybe for a future, you're right, I think maybe policy or just overall strategic discussion about.
So I'll put leases / town-owned property, maybe? Does that kind of, and we can kind of draft conversation around that and whether that looks at policy, guidance, kind of sense of the board, whatever.
Now that we're looking at RDIC and PEC are now working on trying to bring business in, are they looking to lease that property from the town, or do they want to buy it? Or how are we going to structure that? So,
Paula, is there anything kind of from a board perspective, I want to make sure?
I was just thinking of what we have in another group or organization that I belong to. Okay, when you just happen to pop into my mind with lease and lease agreements and this sort of thing. Okay, so in other words, okay, if we're going to look at doing something like that, we should probably look at each individual case and see where it stands and what we think should be appropriately done for it. In other words, okay, so you have a case for maybe a building of normally probably used for one thing and another building used for a couple of other things and so on and so forth. So these are the type of things that, you know, you have to study, you have to look into a little bit, and that's what we found was necessary to do for the types of uses that the building was put to.
Yeah, so kind of incorporating that town property and the priorities of town and everything. I just want to remind the board that town should hopefully have in the next few months an adopted master plan, newly adopted master plan, and hopefully signed off on open space and recreation plan. And I think being mindful that we will have those two documents. We also have the town center study. Harry, you and I participated in that committee a few years ago. And as we're talking about the economic development piece again, not losing sight of that, because there was a lot of work that is still relevant, and master plan ties some of that, you know what I mean? So kind of in looking at the overarching goals, and this is maybe another piece for the board, is to work more closely with the boards and committees, especially our appointed boards and committees, so that they're not doing our exact work, but they're working towards the common goals of town through master plan, through the board's goals and objectives, through staff's goals and objectives, through master plan, open space and rec plan, town center study and everything. So trying to maybe improve relationships / communication with boards and committees. Elected, I think we can improve conversation and relationships there. We don't have much direction over them, any direction over them, but also for the appointed, just kind of making sure that we're all working towards.
Well, maybe for that, we can consider, you know, like, this last year with the whole budget meeting that, you know, you had that roundtable where all the departments came in, kind of gave their spiel, talked to everybody, was allowed to ask questions. Obviously not during budget season, but maybe we can do a similar format with a lot of the committees. And
For the next one.
Well,
have committees come in and kind of give us, what have you been doing? What's going on? Let's have a discussion about.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I think the board has done that previously, and maybe just, I think when I first started there, the historical commission came in and kind of did an update, but I've seen some communities that, especially after the board adopts their goals for the year, they sort of, you know, they call it like an all boards committee, and, you know, we, you know, take some space maybe up like Glenwood night in the gymnasium, and we have all the boards and commissions, and you kind of have the board at the head of the table, if you will, and you guys are talking through your boards, and then it's an opportunity for an open discussion with all the board and commission members to say, well, what's the work that you're doing this year, make sure that it ties in with some of the things that you guys have created for commitments, but also reminding them of, you know, some of the recent planning documents. Obviously, we're going to start budget season, things like that. So it's like a perfect time of the year to get everyone together and hopefully get everyone coordinated. So
We've talked about doing it. So we get, you know, everybody says they want it, and then we get pushback because it's another meeting. It's, do we do it on a Saturday, then and ask staff to be there? That's a big commitment. Do we do it on an evening? That's another evening meeting for a lot of people. Again, if we ask staff to be there or not. So there are considerations. I think we definitely should work towards that and kind of look in the fall to do the first half of the fall, and late summer or early fall, to do something for sure.
I think one of the things that we found that came to light was, okay, different people use the building for different things, okay? And so, all right, men would appear to use the building for things that would probably be more inclined to go along with them. And I know this is going to appear to be sexist, but it's not. Okay, and women will come in and use the building in a different manner completely, okay? So in other words, when you're looking at putting together a lease agreement, it's kind of important to know just what uses the building will be used for.
Yeah, definitely. There's something else popped in my head that left. So if I think of it again, but kind of, I think we have three kind of overarching pieces right now. capital projects, investment slash facilities, staff, and kind of board specific.
Can I have one more?
Yeah, yeah.
And this might tie into some of your TA goals, but I would really, really like to clean up the outstanding articles
Yeah.
and close out what has been out there for, in some cases, a decade or
So, we're working actually with the accountant to do a lot of that. There's a lot of
Okay.
just articles that have $5 left that
Yeah.
will close it pretty fast. But some of the ones that there's been no progress
Yeah.
will definitely, I think, be a board discussion for you guys to
Right.
say, hey, maybe we don't.
need to
do-
rethink
this
this.
isn't a priority, yeah, we'll
And I
either
think,
reallocate it or just let it closer to
Right.
the cash,
Yeah.
do something different.
and I think in the, sorry.
It's a good practice too. I think we're, in the policies actually, sorry.
No, I was gonna just say, I think in the financial policies that we adopted, I think any of the new articles, I think there's a closeout after a year or two. I can't remember the time frame of it, but there was definitely language about it closing out if there was no movement, whether that's, it doesn't necessarily have to be initially spent, but you need to make a commitment that it's going to be spent.
Yep.
But that's obviously, I think, more towards the new articles, the old ones, we wanna make sure that,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I may, just a quick question. I don't know if it falls under board or the bylaw section, but would it be possible to have the board oversee to make sure that we do something with the wetlands bylaw this year? Because I know it's been talked about for a very long time, but I think fiscally, it would be very helpful to both the commission and the town and the staff.
That ties into what my other thought was, is, I don't know, I think this is maybe a contentious piece for the board, but I would really like to see some support behind the adoption of CPA at the November ballot, because I think the decisions as the percentages and everything are already made, but I think that there's been a lot of value to, we have seen documentation of value of having that move forward. I was gonna tie in the CPA adoption piece with also looking at specifically the wetlands bylaw. We know Rutland is wet, whether it's officially wetlands or not, and a lot of the buildable space is now, that's left is wet, and we're not gonna prohibit that development, but we need to be ensuring that we're protecting our natural resources as well. So I would very much support if the board is amenable to kind of, and that goes a little bit with the board and committee relations, communications, but really encouraging like Concom with the wetlands bylaw. Planning boards and elected, we have the discussion back and forth with them with the master plan, and stuff, so that's.
Who would actually be responsible for reviewing and
So
getting the wetlands bylaw on? Is that us, or is that
So,
technically speaking?
I think currently it sits with Concom.
Okay.
It would have to go to town meeting.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this the other day. I actually would like to see it if we can do it for the fall town meeting. I know it's a little bit of a change, and we've been pushing kind of some change as far as what's discussed at fall town meeting versus annual town meeting. Fall used to kind of only be the spending town meeting, it was called special. Since I've been on the board, I think since I've been in town, we've always had a fall town meeting and an annual town meeting and in the spring. And I always point back to the marijuana bylaw stuff went through at a fall town meeting. So if it's something that people feel strongly about, they're gonna show up. But that's, I personally would love to see that. But I don't know how the board, I don't wanna push that if the board is totally objectionist to it, but I think that there's.
If I may, it's been drafted, but is in a holding pattern, that I think we have a very, very strong commission now, that if all members were given the opportunity to weigh in and finalize it, I think it's a very reasonable goal to have something for the town meeting.
For September, or for fall?
For November, yeah.
November.
I'm a bit confused. We're talking about watershed?
No,
No,
that's DCR.
watershed is DCR.
Okay.
Wetlands bylaws.
Okay, wetlands. Wetland, well, see, I heard building, I heard wetlands, and I heard preservation of it. And my feeling is if we have wetlands and nobody could build on it, isn't it already preserved?
So currently, because we don't have a wetlands bylaw, anyone is supposed to follow the wetlands, correct me if I'm wrong, because you attend Concom and you know better than I do. I just know from listening to the meetings, and Austin, you as well. My understanding is we have the Wetlands Protection Act, but because we don't have a wetlands bylaw, we can't really enforce anything. We have no enforcement power, so there's all these essentially guidelines for the protection of wetland resources, but nothing is enforceable because we don't have a bylaw.
Yeah, if I may, so Harry, the Wetlands Protection Act says that anytime you're working within the 100-foot buffer zone of a bordering vegetated wetland,
Yeah.
you can work in there, but you have to have proper permitting through the commission.
Okay.
Because we don't have a bylaw, there is no restriction as to how close they can get to the wetlands. So the commission can kindly say, we want a 25-foot no touch. But if they choose to go past that, we have no way to enforce it. So the other thing is there are fees that we could be charging for our services that we currently can't charge without a bylaw. For example, certificates of compliance, determination of applicability. We're not charging for any of those things, despite the fact that it does cost staff time and other resources.
Okay.
So like the general fund ends up subsidizing a lot of the work, and for example, Tamika does a lot of it and all of that work, or a future conservation agent engineer would be doing a lot of this work, and there's no, the applicant essentially getting that.
So what would be the enforcement, what would be the enforcement on it? What would the town do if something got violated and we had the bylaw in
Yeah.
place?
So there's fee
Yeah.
structures, yeah, and then there's fines and
Fines.
things associated with that, that if you're in violation, like no different than any other bylaw that we have.
I've heard instances where a builder has a 20-foot or 25-foot and then ends up doing 20 feet instead of 25 up to the
Well, that would be a good
watershed.
example of violation, right? So
Right, so that's what I'm saying, something like that.
Yeah.
Do we fine them $50? Do we stop them until they fix it? I mean, it's nice to have a bylaw, but if you want teeth, something is, and you can work that out later, but now I
Yeah, so
understand.
yeah, that's the purpose of the bylaw, because right now, technically speaking, we can't stop their project and we can't fine them. We just have to hope that they
Play
follow
nice.
the rules. Yeah, play nice
And
essentially.
they're losing out too.
And sometimes the DEP will get involved, but a lot of times it has to be a pretty egregious offense because they're just so busy, whereas we would be able to handle it on the local level.
Okay.
It's also one of those that, you look at probably some of the development that's occurred over the past several years, and, I can think of one area, I'm not gonna name it, but there's areas of town where you pretty much see a house or a property that's right there, and you see water or swamp right there. So, it allows, I think, for an opportunity to create a little bit more distance, if a community decides to make sure that you're not really, because, you can make the argument that there's no disturbance, but just by the nature of it being there is some sort of a
And
disturbance.
sometimes it comes back to bite us a little bit, because then those are sometimes the people that buy those homes will come back to the town and say, I'm having water issues, I'm having erosion
And
issues,
you approve
and we have, and then,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
it's kind of,
Yeah.
it gets us that way too.
And along the lines, I think if the board, and this is really kind of falls to staff, probably Tamika, can be mindful and review fees that we're currently charging for all of our permitting and
So we don't have any.
no, I'm not only speaking for wetlands,
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
only speaking
You're
for
talking
Concom.
about the fee schedule in the back.
Exactly,
Oh, got it.
But we did do that during the bylaws, right?
right, but I think,
There's certainly some, I know, the planning board has asked the town planner to take a look at some of the associated fees that the planning board has. I think that is something that probably, especially during the budget process, we can start including and asking departments to take a look at your costs, do some sort of comparative analysis. Our new building commissioner already has taken a look at our fees, like, hey, there's some things that you guys are very light on that these, I'm gonna use the word developers, love coming to Rutland because they're either paying nothing or significantly lower than all of our neighboring communities.
And that means that all of our taxpayers are essentially subsidizing
Right.
the development.
Is there an area that comes to mind when you're talking about this?
What do you mean, Paul?
In other words, you're talking like a specific location where somebody's sitting on the edge of a
I think there's a few
Yeah,
areas.
there's a few.
there's a few.
Your house.
Okay, I was just wondering, any one particular came to mind, that's all.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
I think we all get comments, I think just out and about in town, like, did you see that house being built in the swamp? And I think we've all heard comments similar, and so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big comment I hear, Leah, is, well, why did you allow that to be built? I said, that's the planning board. They approve these things, we don't.
And that's,
They're an elected board.
but I
you know?
think, yes, and it's conservation and it's planning, both, because in some cases, both have to sign off on it, and we can try to work with planning board in better relationships with zoning and everything, but also work with Concom to make sure that there's a wetlands bylaw with specific language that kind of spells it out, rather than the general mass, because to me, this point, it puts it at the local level. We, as Rutland, can say this is what Rutland has, not a state.
And it makes it equitable so that there's not an appearance that one developer is allowed to do this, but then another developer is upheld to a different standard.
Right.
It shouldn't matter who's sitting on the commission at that time, it should just be straight across the board.
Right. Is this something Concom's looking for, to have a bylaw passed?
So it's something since before I was on the board, I know the board's been pushing to have Conservation Commission develop a wetlands bylaw to bring before us to put on a town meeting, because it's a bylaw, it needs to be approved at town meeting. And so I think if we as a board can have that consensus, to put a little bit more pressure on Conservation Commission to say, hey, we appointed you guys, this is a major goal of ours as a board this year, we would like to see something for the fall town meeting, here's the back schedule for when everything needs to happen, then I believe, based on the meetings that I've been on, there's good progress on a wetlands bylaw. There's many communities in Massachusetts have a wetlands bylaw. It's not new, it's not, and so,
Start from scratch.
right, and so there's model ones available, and it's kind of plug and play your pieces of necessity, or.
If the bylaw, I'm sorry,
No.
if the bylaw becomes an enforcement piece, I think that's important. If the bylaw is created just to make things difficult, then that's a different story.
My understanding is it's really the enforcement piece, and
Okay.
that's kind of a little bit of the tie-in of having a conservation agent, or someone filling a capacity there, is to help handle that enforcement piece, because.
Can I just add to that too? So I think I think there's a little bit of an in-between there too, Harry, that you could, so we want to preserve our natural assets too, right? So we get, I think, calls all the time from residents that are complaining about runoff, erosion control, water issues, things like that. And I think that this can also be a way to preserve, we have a lot of great assets, natural assets in the community. And while I think it may be considered in some respects as a barrier, it's probably a good thing in some respects. Because the last thing you want is some, for example, a commercial development right up on the wetlands, there's oil spill, and you've just completely destroyed one of your most beautiful natural assets too. So it's kind of a preservation piece, if you will, as well.
And there are
And protection.
there's some quasi-endangered species, painted salamander, some of the turtles and everything that we know are in these resource areas that currently we don't have any protections over. And so I think through open space and rec plan, there's a little bit more push to do some vernal pool looking, which is another kind of very specific natural resource for some of these endangered species and everything. So kind of tying it all together and being mindful that it's a preservation piece, not so much of a barrier to the work, but it's really to preserve the habitats and the resources that we have.
I mean, I'd be interested in doing the process just to see how how it comes out, you know, what enforcement issues there are, and how it protects everything out there, yeah, that Concom can't do, yeah.
Yep. So it's almost 7:45, so is the board kind of okay with where we are right now? Is there anything else that anyone feels strongly that we need to jot down? Otherwise, I'd like to kind of move into the goals and objectives for the town administrator.
Well, go ahead.
No.
There are three things that did get covered the last time. One is establishing a long-term financial planning model. We never did anything on that. I would like the board to move forward on that. Okay, I mean.
Oh, that's not true. We do have, that's the model that was created and included in the budget document. So that's that 5-year planning model that goes out to 2029.
Okay.
So we do have that. Obviously, it wasn't reflected in.
Yeah, I apologize.
No. I look, when I say financial planning, I'm looking at how do we look at planning budgets out, not just capital or that.
Yeah. Well, that has
Okay.
costs associated with it. So it has projected revenues, some assumptions based on there,
Okay.
and then projected expenses. It also includes, some of our high-level projections for our educational assessments as well. So
Okay. Okay.
Well, I guess I'll cover some of that in my goals when we talk about
I was gonna say, I think that's one of those, for sure, those kind of overlap pieces that continuing to build, to continuing to prioritize that financial team piece of town, I think.
Yeah.
And the other one is, from the old, create consistent communication strategies for town departments. Is that on your discussion topic?
It is, I think, so, that goal, I think, was started, and was related to when we were working on the town website as a part of the grant program. I think it was developing our website, but also creating some sort of a consistent communications program, if you will, for all departments to follow. We do have, and I think some of it ties to some policy. For example, social media is a perfect example of, we have boards and commissions, we have town departments with official, social media pages, for example, that maybe aren't consistent with probably what the board would like or the town should have from a communications piece. So I think that's still ongoing.
But you still meet with the departments on a regular basis?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I just got to find out when you do, and I can sit in on a meeting and look at communication, if you will, just to follow up, just to be there.
So I think.
I think usually those are kind of staff meetings for us to kind of catch up, but those are on a monthly basis, but that's not to say that we don't coordinate monthly. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that, as you know, I think you've walked into the town hall and the door's wide open. I see Paul all the time, but I'm also kind of that management by walking around style, so I like to spend time out of the office and meeting with people where they are too, so.
I mean, you're the only source we have for the department, so I don't communicate with them, I don't talk with them, I don't review them, so I was looking at that as an opportunity as a select board member to kind of bring myself up to speed on things, rather than asking you 52,000 questions about this department, this, that, and that.
And I think, this, I don't think touches exactly on what you're asking, but I think in the kind of that HR goals and objectives review piece, some of that is providing in that piece, providing an opportunity for people to provide feedback about their supervisor. Whether that's employee to department head to administrator to select board, to provide a two-way communication stream that isn't solicited by any one member or any group or anything, that it's just a standard practice. If that.
Don't understand.
So, for example, when I.
What I'm saying is, we're selectmen, and Austin's doing his job, but I feel like as a selectman, we should be around. I'm gonna walk in the D, how you guys doing? Hi, Chris, how you doing?
Yeah.
What's up? I only got 2 seconds to say hi, just to let you know that, Austin's around, he's doing his thing, but I think as a selectman, I'm gonna say hi to you.
Yeah.
Whether it be
There's
my
nothing to
right-
restrict you from doing that now.
I know, but
I think there's the challenge, Harry, and this is a challenge I think, and I experienced this when I was a board member, was I remember I was elected and I had, in my head, I'm one of the 5 chief executive officers, right? I'm gonna go in and if I see something that's wrong, I'm gonna tell them that. But that's not obviously the role of selectmen anymore, right? They don't necessarily, I hate to say it like this, they don't necessarily run the town from a day-to-day perspective. I think, and I fully hope that you have an opportunity to establish a relationship with all town staff, whether they're a department head or whether they're one of the lifeguards down at the pool. And I know that I see Paul all the time, whether he's at the senior center or he's in town hall talking with folks, so I think that opportunity to establish that relationship exists.
Yeah.
I think it does sort of become a different relationship when it does become sort of involved more in the day-to-day and becoming more of a directive kind of relationship, which I think has evolved from the days of when the selectmen were full-time selectmen and it was pretty much their job to quote-unquote run the town.
Yeah, see, I don't see selectmen jobs going in and saying, I want to know what you're doing. I want to know how you feel. I think just the idea that says, we care. We're here. We say hi.
Mm-hmm.
Some departments will bring a $10 or $20 gift card for Dunkin' Donuts, so hey.
Full disclosure, guys, it's not a bribe.
It's unlimited. And it's not cash.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right, so that clears that up. And then the other one, I saw there was a video out, it just came out of the meetings you had between EDC and RDIC. I didn't have a chance to really look at that, because that brings up the development, develop economic department, marketing solution. You kind of organize those two together and they're kind of running now.
Yeah, so
I
actually
don't have to make a big issue.
that's also something that should have been reflected in these updates. So you recall, I think I sent a note to the board. Our town planner was successful in receiving a technical assistance grant from the Regional Planning Commission to develop an economic development brochure, but also developing a business inventory. There's also been some other opportunities that have come up to try to market us a little bit. So there's a magazine that's interested in profiling the community and wants to come out to interview some of our businesses, talk about some more land use. So we've been working through the planning office to kind of schedule that as well. So those are ongoing, and that'll never stop. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend to have that as a goal, because I think that's the point of having staff, and I think it was a great opportunity when you guys were previous board established the Economic Development Committee, because that's in their charge, is to keep working on stuff like this. So organize business socials or develop relationships with the Chamber of Commerce, things like that. So those are always ongoing, but there is a couple of things right now that are directly tied and related to that goal too.
And Harry, I did write down continuing economic development focus, and I kind of see that kind of tying in with the boards and committee communication and everything, just continuing to empower staff to lead that, but also know that for EDC/RDIC that this is still a major focus of.
The reason I think I've been preaching this for years, even through CIPC. It's so important to business development in this town. You don't grow a town economically by raising taxes. You grow it economically by bringing businesses into town. And we've been stagnant. We've been growing this town through taxes, and we can't do that anymore. And that's why that was so important to me, to see you get those two together, to start talking about that.
Yeah, well, you'll see in that discussion, it's very clear, I think, one of the things that was right from the start was clear is that I think the board needs to work with RDIC to develop a formal charge. Members of RDIC kind of, I think, expressed some challenge with that. They don't know what their responsibility is because they don't have any sort of guiding document. And I think that should be really something that hopefully they can work with you guys on, is to formalize what they think they should be working on, and also with you. They're one of your longest standing economic development kind of related committees, been in existence since the 60s.
But I'll tell you, I sat on RC, and it's kind of disappointing to hear that after all these years, they weren't able to come up with a charge or a mission statement. Seriously?
Yeah, well, this is an opportunity.
So, and
You guys are there, you can do it now, right?
to look back with the boards and committees relations communications, Tamika and I pulled the charges before we did the appointments. We saw that most of them had them, we asked them. I think we have, economic development is editing theirs also to kind of provide an updated one. So I think that that's one piece. I wrote down the wetlands bylaw for fall town meeting, but also charges that we work with all of the boards and committees in these communications to so that they understand what their work is and we understand what their work is, that it's a two-way street that, so I did write that down. And I think we had done preliminary work on that, but there's still ongoing work, to do. So I think that covers some of that paragraph, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So we can move into, the town administrator goals and objectives.
You're gonna force me to eat a piece of pizza.
So I think that this is like a house one, it's meat and veggies, then there's a veggie, there's a cheese, and there's meat. And here is paper towels and napkins, because that's how I roll. So I think Austin has prepared some stuff. Ally had kindly pulled out some of the highlights from the review piece that we had done, the annual review for the town administrator. And just kind of to reiterate kind of the job description, I think is the town administrator is charged with planning, developing, and organizing strategies with department directors, department heads, town employees, and with facilitating and coordinating efforts of citizen committee members to achieve goals and objectives. And just kind of knowing that the town administrator runs the day-to-day of the town, and seeks based on kind of our board directives. Austin, do you have?
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. Obviously this is going to be the first year where we had this discussion talking about goals. It was a little odd to have a performance review where there's really nothing to tie that to, so it felt a little weird for that evaluation process to occur. But I think this is a good opportunity to consider that, but also to try to think about some of the things that I feel are important for myself personally, professionally, and I think are important for the organization. So I have kind of 5 different overarching categories with some tasks or goals or initiatives that I think would be important to try to work on. Certainly some of these are larger. I'm not going to solve all the problems within the next year, but I'll just quickly roll through and I'll explain why I think they're important and certainly open to any discussions. First thing is community and outreach. One of the things I started when I first started this job was attending a monthly.
Something I'd say?
Attending a monthly coffee talk at the senior center. I do that on the last Friday of every month, so tomorrow I'll be there again. Started off with a handful of people. It's slowly growing a little bit, and I usually try to also bring department or staff member with me to provide an update to folks at the senior center. It's also published in the newsletter, and I think hopefully we can try to find some other venues to kind of promote that. I want to commit to continuing that as well every month. But I also, I see some town managers, town administrators that they hold standing, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly office hours with an opportunity come between 2 and 4 p.m. on Tuesday afternoons, and an open opportunity to chat with the town administrator and converse about things, and we can kind of promote that. I think it's a good opportunity to meet with people. I do think that there's some times when, for example, our good friend Louis stopped by the other day, wanted to meet with me, but I was out on a site walk or meeting with the department. So I think it would be also nice to be able to say, hey, why don't you come back at 2 on Tuesday and meet with Austin to talk about things. So something I'd like to start for this year.
I was just gonna, if I can, I would think I appreciate the senior coffee talk hours, but then also to your point, I think having something that's open to the more general public also is definitely beneficial, because I know that a lot of the senior coffee talk stuff, a lot of the senior activities are very much promoted as for seniors 60 and over. And so some folks might not feel comfortable because they're not 60 and over. So if there's some, and maybe it's 1 week, maybe it's twice a month or something, I don't know, and one's an afternoon and one's a morning or something.
Next is, this was something I talked about when I was, I think, interviewing for the job. Something when I kind of first started meeting with folks is establishing a monthly newsletter. I'm happy to say that we're going to get that started.
Is that online?
It will be online, but also we will, our intention is to also publish a condensed version to include in the quarterly tax bills. This is not only just an update from myself and the select board, but also try to involve town departments in providing updates, and boards and commissions as well, in providing updates to the community, something that we'd like to publish. And I know Tamika's already sent out that message to folks to let them know that we're working on it. We did a social media blast asking folks to name the newsletter. There's some really creative names out there on social media, so I'm excited. I think that's a really great tool to get information out.
I think that has huge potential to expand. Also, you know, I don't want to expand it immediately, but I think that there's huge potential to expand because, you know, kind of even like the landmark and everything has kind of decreased its coverage of local events. And so to have something that's Rutland specific and monthly is a great start, but I can imagine the want and need to do something more.
Yeah, and, you know, I have larger goals too. I'd love to start working with Paul and do some sort of a community access television program. We'll get there. I don't think I have a face for TV quite yet. There's always a chance, a possibility, but you know, I think that that's just one of the ways that you can try to get information out there and talk to people. So I think that that's a good start. And then this is kind of a project-related thing, but it relates to some of the discussion points we just talked about. But I specifically referenced the Hubbardson cell tower or communications tower cell service RFP. The Hubbardson Tower project has been a project that has, I think, just been ongoing for a long time, and it's created, I think, at some points of contention between Rutland and the town of Hubbardston. This is an opportunity for revenue generation for the regional dispatch, but also provides a quality cell service, not just for our partners in Hubbardston, but also we will reap the benefits of it. You probably, if you've driven to or through Hubbardston, you know that your cell service drops almost immediately once you hit the line. This will provide an impact, a positive impact for Hubbardston residents, but also some of our residents on the Rutland Hubbardston side. So that also was stalled because we realized fairly recently that the Hubbardston Tower was actually constructed without an easement. That's been filed. Hubbardston filed that. That's something I think that was just missed during the pandemic, so that's been completed. That kind of halted our progress for the RFP process. So that's been completed. I think that we can get an RFP out by the end of the summer and work with Hubbardston to get some cell carriers on there. I do think that that'll.
But it's up and running.
Oh yeah. The tower's been up and running. It's actually been running at 25% power. Mike Moriarty actually received a grant to upgrade all of the cell tower equipment on all of our towers in the district, so which also includes some increased efficiency. So we're going to see not only increased cell coverage from this RFP, but also increased radio coverage for all of our public safety across the whole district. And that's a huge credit to Mike and State 911 for getting that project. And then I just talked about these town-owned land projects. I mean, I have so much enthusiasm for, especially the Heights property on 68. There's so much opportunity for whether it's town projects or economic development initiatives. So that's part of the reason why I also wanted to have that meeting last night with RDIC and EDC is to talk about this. But I have had conversations, and I have some conversations scheduled with some of our regional partners. So Next week I'll be meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, to talk about Rutland and try to promote Rutland and some of our business interests and some other related business development organizations.
Any of that for the town-owned land projects involve potentially rezoning any property to be able to build it and use it for?
Yeah, so some of the parcels that I think the board has given me directive on are actually already zoned appropriately
Okay.
for commercial development. I think there are some others that could be suitable for rezoning. I think that's sort of been the work of the EDC,
Yep.
is to identify rezoning opportunities, but also, you know, it's also the purview of the planning board, right? So I think establishing that relationship with members of the planning board and the bylaw committee to recognize that.
And-
But so far right now, I mean, some of our corridors that we think about, you think about 68, you think about 122, parts of 122A, I mean, we actually have some pretty good
There's-
zoning districts.
Yeah.
It's just there hasn't been that total initiative to kind of get some attraction
Yeah.
and some work done there, so.
Do you know, I'm just curious, on 122, it used to be a daycare.
I think that
Is
that's
that town or is that privately owned?
private. And I was just gonna ask Austin, I think this is not, I don't want it to be a specific goal for the town administrator because I think there's many pieces to it. But looking at the properties that are zoned, nice, like location and zoned appropriately, and how can we potentially work with property owners within our legal capacity to look at either redevelopment or development or reuse or whatever. Also, I think open space, I believe, will have a list of all the 61A properties, and AgCom is supposed to be listing on ranking those, so that if anything were to come up, it's ranked as to what may make sense for town to invest in, whether it's to with 61, it needs to be a portion of it, a significant portion of it needs to remain as open, but there are some opportunities for development, a piece of that. So are there opportunities to do something, priority, you know, kind of establish a priority list for that land also, so that it's not just buying to buy, but buying with an intent for an economic piece, or whether it's an economic piece or it's a draw to get more people to come to town, capitalizing on our open space opportunities and everything.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that that's administrator specific, they have to just kind of for the board to.
Yep.
So in community and outreach, is there anything, else? I think we've learned kind of through the year, I think that some of the communication piece, we just have to keep reiterating things. The stormwater was a big one there, and providing more opportunities for that. We know we need to do the education piece for the stormwater, so again, I think that, continuing to hold the senior coffee talks and office hours as well as the newsletter and continuing to expand it, utilizing the website, social media, all of it.
And we can probably work it into the monthly newsletter, but I feel like it still shocks me going to town meetings and how few people show up. And is there a way that how many people just are not aware of how the town allocates money? And is there a way that we can just educate on just general town government? And maybe they don't know that they need to be there, that their vote at town meeting actually means something.
Yep.
So is there a way that we can use that newsletter or some other?
Yeah, especially if we're gonna
that,
mail it out quarterly,
Right.
that's a perfect opportunity to say, hey,
Your
town
voice
meetings are coming,
matters.
do the warrant, things like that, yeah.
And I think we've talked about doing like a citizens academy to local government, and that's not, again, that's specifically like an administrator goal. It's kind of more, I think, a board initiative. I think at some point we were trying to partner with the library. But again, maybe some assistance in driving that also.
Just moving to departments, I think one of our most important partners is the school district. I think I have a lot of confidence in the new administration. I think they're doing a lot of work to try to clean up the organization, and I think obviously it's been, and it's not just Rutland that has had the challenging relationship. I think all the community communities have had that. So I have a really good relationship with the superintendent. We meet monthly, and I talk weekly, several times a week, with the facilities director to talk about some facilities issues and challenges. So I just want to continue to work with that to strengthen those relationships. But also, I just, it's goes without saying, but they're one of our largest cost structures, and I think we need to find a way to improve our long-term fiscal planning with the school district. They are 60% of our budget, and I have a lot of ideas to do that. I think it just, one, I'm going to need some political support. I can't go into a school committee meeting and say, you guys need to work with us and meet with us. I think I'm going to need some help from you guys. But also, I've already reached out. I had a really good conversation today with the Rutland town manager about ways that we can kind of strategize communication with the school district about some of our fiscal challenges. We're all up against it, even Rutland. So I really want to find a way, and we have an idea for kind of a fall fiscal summit between select boards, school committee, and finance committees, getting everyone at the table to talk about the condition of each community and where we are and what the impact is on all of us. So I think it's going to be critical, especially as we went through the recent budget process and we heard, some of the challenges that the school district is saying that they're facing. We got to start early and try to have those discussions. So it's a little bit challenging. We got 5 towns, 5 different select boards and FinComs, and then however many members, 27 members, I think.
It's down a little bit.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, but still a lot.
So it is a challenge, but it's not impossible. And especially in the conversation with Holden, we combine, and we're almost 60% of their budget. So we've got some, I hate to say it like this, but power authority to be able to try to combine and say, we really need to focus ourselves and make sure that we're coordinated and not just getting a bill or getting an assessment in March, right? So.
Can I ask you a question, Russ?
Yep.
I don't know that much about the school committee. I do get a sense that they are there for the school, not to the town, school committee. I have heard and felt that this Wachusett has felt like they are above everybody else in the past. I don't know if that was a cultural issue, a superintendent issue, or whatever. But my question is, how do you feel today with that sense? Do you feel like everybody wants to work together on the same page?
Yeah, I can only speak, I've had my most involvement with district administration and the school principals, and I have had great experience with them. Candid discussions about where they think they are, where we are. Those monthly meetings are great. It's an open opportunity for us. We meet in the superintendent's conference room, and quite literally we go around the table about what's going on, what are the challenges that we face. I haven't had those same discussions with the school committee members. For no other reason, I just don't think they've occurred. There's an interest, I'm sure, on both sides. They just haven't happened. I do think, and maybe a little bit, this is maybe a little bit of an older style. I do think that it is appropriate for elected officials to work with each other, and it's my job to make sure that the staff and the organization runs. So I really don't think that I have, I should be in the position to, for example, go to the school committee chair or our Rutland reps and talk about some of the challenges. I do think that that's my responsibility to inform you as a board, and you have those discussions. No different than communication with the planning board or any other elected official that we have with them. So.
And I think, if I may, I think at the FinCom meeting, there was some desire to try to have our Rutland school committee reps meet jointly with FinCom and ideally select board, but it was specifically FinCom. There's weird school committee rules around the elected members being able to verbally participate in meetings because they can't speak on behalf of the entire committee, so they can essentially sit and listen, but they can't necessarily engage in conversation. And that's a whole district agreement that is very difficult to
Yeah.
So I think that there is a desire there to try to Austin's point, engage a little bit more with the elected school committee officials, but how we can best do that, we need to work out.
Yeah, you know, when you have a committee that has their own state rules, doesn't answer to us, and doesn't have to give us answers,
Exactly.
it's very difficult to try to work. So
Yes.
I hope for the future that something will develop there.
I think with all due respect to the school committee, I think that's a cop-out. Because they're independently elected officials, their name is on the ballot. They're not necessarily speaking on behalf of the committee, but it's no different than when you guys make a vote, you communicate what that position was of the majority of the body to your constituents. I think that's a way for them to essentially not have a discussion. And I don't want them to take that as criticism. I think maybe there's probably an issue with the policy or an issue with interpretation of the policy. I think that they represent Rutland residents, right? We should be able to have a candid discussion about some of the challenges. Because if they're a candidate, they can say whatever they want. But as soon as they become an elected official, they can't. I have a challenge with that, and I know that that's something that has been expressed.
The reason I say that is just from personal experience or committee experience, because years and years ago, we tried to get the people from the school committee to come to us, about what's going on, what should we know, what's ahead of us. Nobody ever showed up.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and I think similar to how over the years we have had more of the day-to-day go to the town administrator, more of their day-to-day is through their superintendent and staff. And so I think the relationship now with the current superintendent and staff is much more open to dialogue with town staff. And I think one of the big challenges is with five-member regional district and a school committee that, to Austin's point, is almost 20 people, and then you have 20 plus select board members and 20 plus FinCom advisory board members, it becomes unattainable quickly. So I think that that's kind of moving away from the town administrator's goals, but consideration for us as supporting the administrator's goals and working with the schools, but also within Rutland's capacity.
Yeah.
Can I ask, and obviously Bay Path is a significantly less, as far as financially on the budget, but do you see, is there the same need? I mean, I know we have a good relationship with them too, but even though their portion of the budget is that much smaller, keeping an eye on what they're telling us is it still appropriate as far as the town's portion?
You think about it, because they had a 22% increase this year,
Right.
in the budget. So, so I think the communication from the vocational schools is very different than communication from the regional, which is regional. Partly, I think it's proximity. I mean, it feels like Charlton's so far away. I can only imagine what it's like for the students, I expressed that when I had a meeting a couple months ago at Bay Path, and we got to find a way for all of the partner communities, and I think Bay Path should host it to establish that communication style, because there is very little from Bay Path on what's going on there, because I think that they are viewed very different, and they inherently are very different than their other educational partners. But I do think that it would be a good opportunity to try to improve that.
Just like I said, it's a small number comparably to Wachusett, but I feel like, part of me feels like we're just write that check to them without saying, what are you using this for?
Well, they are with those students that cost a lot more.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, and so this is, I think we're maybe just starting to see it, but when I worked in Acton, there was the last 3 years working there, it was 40% increases every year, because vocational education became more popular, more Acton students wanted to go there. I don't blame them. I'm a vocational grad.
Right.
I tell everyone, go to a voc school if you can. So I could see that happening not only just to Rutland, but all of the member communities of Bay Path. So I do think, and I think all schools are inherently very protective of their like enrollment data. So quite literally, I had to wait until October 1st, if not actually later than that, to get enrollment numbers. But we know that they know
Of course.
where they are. So I think, especially when we're talking about long-term fiscal planning, I mean, we can make assumptions, which is what I did, and we were pretty close, but
Yeah.
it's still only just a projection, so. But yeah, no, that's a good point, actually. I should also include Bay Path in this to strengthen the relationships.
I may, from a Bay Path perspective, like as a parent of a student at Bay Path, I don't know their current thinking for it, but I think that they do have some capital needs coming down the pike, and I'm not sure what their timeline is or anything. They are funded at a much higher rate than Wachusett is, so that's part of the reason that their minimum local contribution is enough, because the state funding formula gives them more money. We pay more per student because the state says we have to pay more per student. So, but I think, Austin, to your point, I think that budget number is probably going to increase, because I think there was a significant wait list for Rutland students to attend, so I think for this upcoming fall. And so I think that we will start seeing our number be at the max.
Yeah.
Where before we weren't hitting the maximum number that Rutland could send.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Austin.
No, it's all right. Sorry, you guys, you're all taxpayers.
But I'm not sure where that number was last year compared to what the number's gonna look like this year, as graduation, matriculation and everything, you know what I mean? So,
My experience with Bay Path is that the previous administration was much more settled and much more comfortable. The new administration is still working to get to that level, okay? That was my experience this year with the construction that we have done in the control area, okay? So, it's something that eventually got done, but not without a few fits and starts, so, but the previous administration, we went through the whole construction of the entire area there, relatively few issues and problems, so, it's different when they change all the horses in midstream, and that's what happened. Okay, superintendent, director, and the assistant both retired, same time. Ouch.
so yeah, Austin, if you can just add in kind of communication with Bay Path officials.
Absolutely.
And we know we have the Bay Path elected school committee members that we should try to include also.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so right now, as I mentioned earlier, we do monthly department head meetings. It's kind of more of a catch-up for everyone to hopefully get on the same page. I think a lot of that happens already. We're not a very large organization, but it's kind of the structured monthly meeting, and we kind of do the round table. I have never been a fan of it in my previous communities, or I haven't been a fan of it here. I think it's, to be honest, I want to find a way to focus our department meetings a little bit more, to engage everyone a little bit more. I think oftentimes it ends up feeling like I either have to come up with a couple of things just to say something, or not much going on this month. And that doesn't feel like we're engaging in a discussion. So I've talked with some of my colleagues, and they recommend kind of a different structure. So one thing that I think has worked well in some communities is they do kind of a quarterly but they still do monthly, very focused. So like a public safety, a human services, a land use, a finance, monthly or more routine, weekly, bi-weekly meetings. So I'm going to start that with finance. We've got, obviously we've got a brand new treasurer collector. We have still fairly new assessor and town accountant. So I'm going to start that, do a weekly meeting with the admin finance team. And then still try to find and identify ways to improve the ways for all of us as department heads, to kind of keep in mind and make sure that we're all kind of working towards the shared goals. Because one of the first things that's going to be relayed once you guys adopt these goals and objectives is we're going to send this to the staff, right? And this hopefully guides their budgetary requests, their capital requests, right? Because it starts from the top, and then it's kind of my responsibility to make sure that those goals are reflected. So that's something I'm still trying to work towards. We've introduced a couple of new things with our department head meetings, a little bit more of an educational component. So Tamika did an update on open meeting law to departments. Our police department did a stop the bleed, which was kind of disgusting, but it was really interesting presentation. Dispatch did something, so I thought that was kind of helpful to try to engage people a little bit differently. But I think always a work in progress.
I think some of the feedback from the previous review was just ways to continue to engage all the department heads and find the best way to work with all the department heads. And I think that that's just knowing your personnel. And I think maybe if you are breaking it down into kind of, you might have like a focused specific time, and maybe it's finance, and then maybe it's kind of community outreach, and that's recreation, safe place, council on aging, and library, or you know what I mean, something, and then it's like public safety, and then it's land use, and DPW, you know what I mean, and trying to, maybe those get mixed up depending on what's going on, but I do think just kind of trying to connect with all the department heads is...
I think it's gotten a little looser. The last meeting I thought was fairly comfortable. Everybody seemed to be reacting to you and reacting to each other as well, so, just my opinion.
Yeah, there wasn't much, we didn't have much going on there, but yeah, no, I agree. It's just, there's, and again, I remember, I look at my calendar when I worked in Acton, and there's a department meeting today, I gotta come up with things to make sure this town manager knows that I'm still working, right? And that,
it's anxiety.
it is, yeah. So I always just, the last thing I want is to make it seem like that 9 AM meeting on the last Thursday of every month is
dread.
I love them. I'm not a department head, but I like them.
Can I just food for thought? We do retrospectives, if you will, and like everybody in the team kind of, what did we do good, what did we do well, what could we have done better? A lot of one of those things that comes up often is, effective meetings and making sure that there's an agenda to state exactly what you're talking about, but just, I guess in general, maybe even offering it up to the meeting participants, are these working for you? Is there a different format? Is there, what did you like about this? What can we do that's different, and just see if they have any, preferred thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm joking, but I suspect the thing will be that no meetings anymore.
Of course.
Yeah.
Still to meet our goals, but.
Yeah, well, especially because I do a lot of like just popping in and meeting with people, which I don't know, it may be a little bit different than previous town manager, I don't know. But there is I think a little bit of the, also I just saw you yesterday and pretty much gave you all the updates. I don't have much for you. But again, I think I need to do a better job of just trying to relay that this is really not for me at all. I think it's just trying to get everyone on the same page, because I think to your point, Jen, I think there's also people have a lot of experience with stuff. So if Harry, the department head, says, I'm really working on this, I'm having a tough time, but Jen said, oh, I did that in my previous community, or I did that a couple of years ago, there's an opportunity for you guys to connect on something that maybe you didn't think about before, or didn't realize that person had that experience. So, I think that also just goes with morale and just overall trying to get people coordinated a little bit. So it's always going to be a work in progress. But I think that's really helpful, Jen. So one of the challenges, and there's a typo here, this third goal is supposed to say investigate and resource full online facility reservation capabilities. So
You mean like booking in a meeting?
Booking a meeting. We have so many different processes. Some buildings have no processes at all. You gotta email this person for this room, another person, it's on a paper calendar. I think there's much better ways to be able to do that everyone, again, to the point about being on the same page. So, because I've had it happen to me, I think Tamika's probably had it, you all have probably had the experience of, you thought you booked a room, and then you show up, and someone else is there. Or,
You didn't know the time.
or yeah,
We
exactly.
ran into that, we were
Yeah.
having a meeting, and then all of a sudden more people start showing up, and we're like, oh, I
Yeah.
guess we're done.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of tools out there. I wanna look into that, whether we can utilize some existing tools or if we identify some other solutions. I'm thinking about more technology related solutions, so if you can go on right now and see if the Blair Room is available tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then if it's available, I wanna book it, and then it goes to that respective department or building head, if you will, and they can confirm that and make sure that everything's coordinated.
Or
Also,
at least you see it online, you can see
Right.
if it
Yeah.
is or not.
right, yeah, because that is a challenge that we have.
I've had that challenge for 15 years.
Yeah, and there are definitely solutions out there that are probably well overdue to take care of, so. We wanna see if we can do that this year.
Okay.
One of the gaps, go ahead, sorry.
Excuse me, I've had 3 or 4 show and tells with the town website, okay? So in other words, there is some confusion out there amongst people who want to find out exactly when the meeting is going to be, okay? Or what's going to be on the agenda with this sort of thing, so. I, showed them how to do it and how to get to it. And, oh, it was simple.
That's a great, actually, point, Paul. I've seen in some communities where it's a simple, it's a couple $100, you buy a TV and you put it in the lobby of meeting spaces,
Oh, yeah.
and it shows you all the meetings that are at the location, time, location, scheduled for that day, and also some other important information. It's like an easy investment that I think can help a lot, so I knew that there's a CIPC meeting today. Let me go to the library and see what it is, if you don't have an opportunity to go on the website. So I think that there's, again, it's kind of technology related, right? I think that we can try to take advantage of those solutions.
If, I don't know if we need, I don't know the proper channels, but if the meeting spaces can kind of automatically have like Zoom built into the meeting space, and everything, so that it's not coordinating necessarily directly with cable, but the rooms, buildings, facilities, whatever, are already equipped for, at the bare minimum,
Zoom rooms or-
Zoom rooms or meeting rooms or whatever, that there's some sort of, maybe there's grants available for the equipment for all of that, or, and, all the meeting spaces, classrooms, conference rooms at the medical school are equipped with simple directions as to how to use it, and everything.
I mean, the meeting space, just from my own perspective, I'll try to set up a meeting, we'll arrange at the meeting what our dates are gonna be. Now I have to go back, I gotta go to the library, I gotta find out if those meeting dates are available, and if they're not, now I gotta come back, email my guys again, the committee, what are we doing here? It's like, how can we not waste time
Yes.
and do stuff?
And I think if all the rooms are equipped with Zoom and a computer and everything, then you also have access to an online calendar that at least you would see is that date even available or not, as well. So I think that it can be multifaceted, or if somebody's like, oh, it's online, I don't have it, but I can look it up, then there's still a computer there for.
Because until I know I got the room, I can't set my agenda until I know where the room is. So I mean, it's a double-edged sword, and it's like, okay, how do we sit with that?
Absolutely, totally agree. So this is an interesting one, emergency management plan. We have emergency management documents that were created by previous emergency management directors, and also I think kind of updated by Seth. These are current emergency management director, but there's also plans that I think need to be created. A lot of it was, it came about when we had the pandemic and everyone was like, hey, how do we respond to this? What's the staffing plan analysis? I think it's important for the town to have one, for town administration and staff in coordination with public safety, because their plans I think are very different, right? They're talking about if there's a hurricane or a tornado, whatever, like a natural disaster, but it's not always related to the operations of government, right? So I think it's an important document to have. The good thing is our emergency management state and federal partners provide resources to be able to create that. So I just want to start that process and work with them to get that plan going. It takes a while. I was on the tail end of one when I was in Acton. It took 2.5 years. But I think the point is start it. There's a lot to that, but I think start it, get that moving, and kind of get all the relative stakeholders involved, because there's a lot to that.
Yeah, I think we've learned that when you have a catastrophe, whether it be New Orleans, you can't act fast enough if you don't get yourself together.
Yeah.
You're just looked at terrible in the town.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things with COVID, right, with the pandemic, is the length of it. So a lot of it is very immediate, even the ice storm in 2008 was short. It was long, but it was short in comparison to years-long pandemic and everything. So I think we
There's
have.
a list of many things that can be taken care of.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Terrorism is one, water pollution is another one, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see a plan that.
Right, it's got to be coordinated, right? Because I think,
Right.
Public safety, they have their own plans, water department through DEP has their own, but there's, you got to kind of find a way to coordinate them. And this is kind of what that process looks like. But it also kind of expands it to kind of a staffing, right? Like, I hate to say it like this, but you really think of like continuity of government, right? It feels weird to say, but it's true. Like, we need to think about that.
Right.
Even being the center of the state.
That's a good thought.
Just didn't shut down, I went to get my car inspected.
Yes.
The whole state inspection system was shut down.
Yeah.
It claimed everything, I'm going.
They just give you a sticker, you're like,
Yeah.
I couldn't use the Doug's app. It wasn't going through that.
Yeah, right.
About emergencies. I didn't get my points that day.
So this last one on departments is, you recall it, the town of Hubbardston kind of sparked that they want to have a discussion about the current IMA for our regional dispatch. I think it's my opinion on public safety, including our dispatch, is I think our best path forward is to transition towards a district model. I think this is another one where I'm going to need a little bit of political support to communicate with our member communities, but this is kind of a process that usually starts from sort of a feasibility study analysis. Now, I don't think we have to go and reinvent the wheel and do our own necessarily feasibility study. I think we can take a lot of the work that other communities have done, because we've already established that we can do a regional dispatch. Right? We don't need to do that. I think it's more, one of the biggest things that I think previous discussions has been, well, it's going to cost so much more, and the communities are just not interested because they have a maybe not totally informed perception that it's a totally different service and has a totally different cost structure. So I really want to advance those discussions after meeting with you folks and identifying that you're supportive of that idea. I have communicated with our town administrators with mixed response, some of it non-response, some of it mixed reception. I may lean on you guys for just some help to kind of advance that a little bit more, where again, it's the elected boards talking to each other and identifying a good solution. I don't think it's dead. I think it's just, I need to have those discussions and know that essentially you guys have my back when I'm trying to present this information, especially because I think long-term it's going to be a great opportunity for that dispatch center to grow and the service to be even better than what it is.
Particularly if we get our own building.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, the district, I mean, I think that we can get a new building now, but when people are looking at that, they when they have a new building, when it's its own district, which essentially all towns essentially have ownership. Like we've talked to communities and they say, hey, I would love to join dispatch, but I want a piece, right? Which we don't have that opportunity right now because one, we're stuck in a 12 by 12, whatever it is, room, housed in between two departments. They need their own identity. And I think that it's gonna, while it's transitioning from being a Rutland program, we will be a part of it because, well, one, we're the largest community right now as a part of that service, but it's going to be, from technology, facility improvements, staffing opportunities, that long-term moving to a district model, I think is going to be better for the service. So I'm hoping that we can advance. It's not going to happen, the whole district thing will not happen this year, but I think we can make a lot of good progress to show that we're moving towards that. And also demonstrating to the state, right? We just funded, thanks to you guys using ARPA, we just funded a feasibility study for the building. That also demonstrates to our partners. Yep. Human resources. Human resources, I think, is always going to be an ongoing initiative. Obviously, we established personnel policies. We have our very first HR director. One of the things that I think is highlighted is we just need to make sure that we're in compliance with regulations for our personnel files. Something that's come up, whether it's with prior personnel matters, current personnel matters, just overall good practice and maintenance of personnel folders. We need to make sure that everything about our personnel file, from their offer letter, from their letter of interest to, unfortunately, if they are ever resigning or discharged from employment, we need to make sure that everything in between has all the information that's necessary and in compliance with law. So it's a big project, it's a big process, and certainly there was some transition there from whether it's in the treasurer collector's office with payroll and transitioning that over to HR, some of the stuff that was housed in our office that transitioned to HR. So there's just regular maintenance and cleanup that needs to happen that hopefully we can accomplish during this year. We, I think, always need to look at our wage classification, salaries and wages for employees. I think it's been a while since we've done a formal comp job description classification study of all of our employees. Our HR director has been working on that. I think she's done a lot of good work that I think will come in the form of a report just for the board to be aware of. I don't know if we're going to be asking for any action items from that report, but I want you to be aware of some of that information, because when we go into the budget process, in consideration of employees, where they're classified, what their job descriptions are, job titles, things like that, I want to be able to go through that process, work with employees, present that to you folks, and hopefully get that into our budget process. And we need to do that every year. We're kind of doing a little bit reactionary now in terms of during the hiring process, right? When someone leaves, it's pretty much our opportunity where we're looking at a job and saying, well, that doesn't make sense. We've added 3 other positions that are doing this job, or that title has changed, or there's no way that compensation is competitive. But we really need to do that from a kind of holistic perspective and do that across the organization.
What did we do a year or two ago when we did something with salaries? We ranked them by based on level 1, 2, 3, or 4 something. We adjusted their salaries and that.
Yeah, so we did that for the clerical union. We created different classifications based off of their negotiated job descriptions and classified them based off kind of a clerical 1, 2, 3, and 4. What we're working on for non-union staff is very similar. I'm not going to call it clerk, but let's just say for point of discussion, clerk 1, 2, and 3, department head 1, 2, and 3, things like that. So it classifies based off of, there's a different criteria that kind of classify you and get you into the different ranges. And that's something that we want to present for the board to consider and hopefully include in our future budget. So.
And I would hope also that with kind of a formal review process and everything, that there would be opportunities for growth built in
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, so actually
because-
policy right now has a reclass. So right now, if an employee feels that they should be reclassified to a different position on our current wage scales, there's an opportunity for them to formally request to the HR director and myself, provide a justification and allow us to have a conversation about, is this reclass appropriate or, or not, essentially. So that does exist. We've had actually a couple of employees exercise that already. In FY24, the select board at the time had developed a funding mechanism for an internship program. Obviously, some things have changed. We had to move some figures around the budget. I do think that there's a benefit from an organization from involving interns. I think from just overall getting folks aware of, interested, involved in local government, but also kind of allows us to build a pipeline. We have a great temporary worker right now. He's helping us in DPW. He's helping us a lot with all kinds of stuff. That's a great opportunity. He's not an intern. He's being paid as a temporary skilled laborer, but that's the kind of, he just graduated from college. He's really interested in local government, especially in public works. It's like you think about how many positions we had vacant in public works for so long, and then we have someone who's really interested. I would love to be able to keep him, right? But internship programs like that, or programs like that allow for an introduction, humanizing local government a little bit in the department services that we provide, and then hopefully saying, hey, we have a position available, do you want to join us?
So it's not he could be let go, he's not an employee, basically, he's not union, doesn't get benefits and stuff. I'm trying to figure out where he fits into the
Yeah, so he
scale.
would be interns are, so Rutland right now classifies employees as seasonal, temporary part-time, permanent part-time, and then like full-time. So interns probably would likely be considered seasonal, just because of the temporary nature that they are. Oftentimes, especially if they're high school or college, it's very limited by like a semester, things like that. So they would be kind of under that seasonal classification. So typically those employees, they don't work enough hours to qualify for benefits, things like that. But I do think that ideally an internship program, if there's opportunities available, I think are a perfect pipeline to try to get people, and especially if you think about succession planning. Because unfortunately, there's always people coming and going in any industry. So if we can provide some sort of a pipeline for departments to develop talent, recruit and retain talent as well.
My reason for asking is I didn't want us to get into a situation like a grant,
Oh, yeah.
and then we're stuck with them.
Yeah. Or unfortunately, we have to let them go because the grant expired, right? Yeah.
So can I expand on that a little bit
Yep.
and kind of reach out to the local, like I know WPI does the IQP process, which is, it's a very short interdisciplinary project focused. So reach out to WPI and maybe see if there's IQP opportunities that town might have that could be, and that the school would be willing to kind of support as well. A lot of them are travel abroad, but there are a lot that happen in Worcester area, or within the states. And also, I know Clark has a large, like Masters of Public Administration program and everything. We're working with the local community, the local schools, the high schools as well as the colleges to see if there's opportunities for, not necessarily even a paid internship, but like a course or a project or a thesis or something that could, for specific projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how much involvement we've had historically with our local educational institutions, but I mean, yeah, especially like I was an MPA student, like they're looking for opportunities to be involved in local government.
And we know that throughout the state that there's a huge need for, to generate interest in local government as a career path. And so that's why I was thinking it can be resource intensive on the staff side, so I want to be mindful of that. But if there's specific projects or something that could be not necessarily cost the town like salary money or anything, but the students are able to to whether it's a thesis project or credit or something,
Yep.
part of it that way.
What departments do you see interns applying to really?
I think so there's a lot of, and I think we can focus on some of the initiatives at the state level. DOR, I think, has recognized that there's a strong need for municipal finance folks.
Yeah.
So I think finance can use a lot of help. Our office can always use help, and luckily it's kind of wide-ranging where you can work on a lot of things. And then land use, especially if you think about planning and a lot of infrastructure work.
Yeah.
That, you think about possibly like an intern civil engineering student.
Yeah.
That may be able to come and work on some projects during the summer or something for Rutland. So those three, but then, I think a call to the local educational institutions and saying, hey, we're looking for interns, and also seeing like there may be something that we didn't even think of. But those are kind of the couple that are probably catch-all and
Yeah.
probably have a lot of students in demand that would probably be interested. I know the public safety police department has a couple interns right now. They already do. I think they have a pretty good internship program, and fire through Anna Maria College, I think I've worked with some students as well. To budget and finance, as mentioned earlier, we do have a multi-year financial model. I have been playing around during the year with some kind of metrics and information, financial indicators that I'd like to include in that model, just to kind of better inform and throw some more data that can inform that model. So, things like just overall demographic analysis of the community, OPEB, pension obligation, liability, things like that, instead of just that one cover page where it's showing revenue and expenditures, I want to show a bunch of things about the community that can inform the financial position of it. So I have some draft things right now, but I'd like to really go on that and make like a solid document that we can include in our budget documents and consider during our budget process overall.
And I just want to try to get Garner's support for being transparent and truthful with that, because we know we're Rutland and it might not always be pretty, but we haven't done ourselves any services in the past by not acknowledging the unprettiness of it. And so I think being open and honest that it's not going to be roses and everything, and a long term and working towards that, and not kind of using that as a
Yeah, I agree.
It just is part of that whole transparency thing, just.
Yeah, trust me, it hurt to include in the warrant that next year showing the 1.3 million, but I think it's
better that they
good to show.
know, and we can work on
yeah.
filling it in the best way possible.
Well, and that's why I really want to expand on the model, because there may be, we know some of the indicators already, but show that and say, why are we at that 1.3 million? What is really getting to that, some of those cost drivers, right? We pay a lot of money every 2 years for an actuary analysis of our employees, right? Which is driving our pension, which is driving our healthcare costs. Like, let's put some of that information to inform people. Our workforce is getting younger. We have, folks that are retiring. It's totally changing the actuary analysis. Pension assessment is going to go like crazy because you hire a young town administrator. No, it's true. We have a changing workforce. And also some of the things nationally that are changing the way that we operate, and some of those cost drivers. And then obviously some of the things about like school enrollment, things like that. So all of that, I think, is good data and good information to include. And I think instead of just looking at that, fiscal outlook and saying, okay, you can flip the pages and say, oh, okay, that makes sense why we're there.
But I think also it can be helpful for all of us here, as well as community, to look at priorities kind of advocacy at the state level also. Like, this is what is, as a smaller community, a smaller rural community, this is what's really hurting us, or what, you know, and it's not gonna fix it. But again, the squeaky wheel, we need, I think, can be better at knowing how to more cohesively advocate at the state.
Yeah.
We're almost there, guys, sorry. We have our very first comprehensive budget document. We have a comprehensive capital plan. I think that we should take credit for the documents that we've created and file for best practice of GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. It gets us some recognition. It tells the community, the residents, our partners in the industry that we're taking financial best practices seriously. So I'd like to file for an award. We meet the standards. I strongly believe we'll get the award. I think it's a win-win for all of us. And it gets, I think, you guys and everyone a lot of the good work and tools that we've put together.
And I think that also shows to the community that we took that financial piece serious when the budget went, when the override, there was a lot of conversation about the finance piece and the commitment to finance. And this is one step to show that we took that seriously and
It's being
have,
acknowledged, yeah.
right, and have a town administrator who is taking it seriously and putting the work in, working with the staff and the departments to really provide that information to the community.
Yeah, and on that note, there's a new document that I'd like to create, which is an expanded audit. It's called the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, ACFR. It's also a best practice for auditing standards. Our audit has a lot of information, and ACFR is like a souped up, I can't say it like that, but souped up audit. Has a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of metrics. That also is a best practice, and actually it's what our bond ratings, our bond rating agencies look for. It really shows that you're taking financial transparency from an auditing and accounting perspective seriously. It does come at an increased cost, so we'll have to consider that during the budget process, because our auditors typically, they just review the financial statements and they do a very generic report. This would be asking them to do a little bit more work, which does come a little bit of a different cost structure. But again, I think it's good for the community and something I'd like to work on.
How often, is that an annual thing?
You do it every year, yeah. So there's a lot of work on the upfront, because it's essentially developing the whole document, and then future ACFRs are just kind of like updates to that information. But I can send you guys some sample ones. We did it, we did an act in Westminster, just did one brand new ACFR. It's a really good tool, and it's another thing that you can kind of promote to people and say, this is like, we're taking financial transparency seriously, which is something that I'm really passionate about.
And if it can help bond rating and everything, as we know, we're going to have potentially have borrowing coming down the line also, if we can take steps to improve the cost of that borrowing as well. I would think it's...
I feel like this was a crazy year of collective bargaining. I didn't expect to do 4 or 5, however many there were in my first year, but we do have an upcoming negotiating opportunity with our fire union, and also our employment agreement with our dispatch director. I just want to make sure that those processes go smoothly, and I'll meet with you to negotiate those ahead of time, but just want to be mindful that those are coming up, and hopefully we have a good negotiating opportunity.
Who do you normally negotiate with in the fire?
They have officers, so they have a president and vice president or stewards, things like that. This will be my first negotiating with a fire union with a strong chief, so it'll be a little bit different. Never done that before. So I imagine that you guys will have a much more direct conversation with the chief, as he's kind of a strong chief and has a little bit different authority than most other fire chiefs. So, but I do have a role at that table because there's the whole budget implication that I want to represent you guys on that path too. So. Infrastructure. So we talked about projects earlier. I think that the board and the community is really poised to do something really good for the municipal, what I'm calling the municipal services facility, to include town hall, staff, and our senior center. The study that you guys funded is nearly done. We have some design concepts that our staff is still providing some feedback on, and will be presented to you guys for consideration. One of my goals is to work with you to identify a plan to advance that project to the design phase. I have some ideas. I really think that there's a lot of good opportunities there. It sounds like there's a willingness from the board level and from members of the community to do something. I think we're in a good position to be able to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion and consideration there, but I just want to be mindful and just want to keep momentum on that project.
When will the project be available for review?
But I would estimate within the next month or so.
Okay.
Yeah. The secondary water source, so right now included in the economic development bill is actually funding to complete that study. Again, as I mentioned in my email, let's hope that the governor approves that. Regardless, I'm going to keep pursuing opportunities to fund that study. The study, as of right now, depending on the scope, ranges from $50,000 to $200,000. So it really depends on how deep we want to get. So I'm asking for the high end always. So right now, it is in the bill, but if not, again, we'll have to identify some sources. I think it's important not only just for our overall just town infrastructure and redundancy, things like that, but it's also a really important economic development initiative. So I'll obviously update you guys if the bill passes and it doesn't have the language. If not, there's some other opportunities that I think we can identify. But that's the first thing we're going to have to do, is really take a comprehensive look at our existing water source opportunities that are available, whether it's MWRA or connecting with Bolden or the wells on Charnock Hill or Barrack Hill. So we have a couple of different options there. But I do think that it's important for the community. And then, yeah, just the final thing, we talked a little bit about it earlier. I do think that there's a benefit to an engineering department to advance a lot of our engineering initiatives. So it's a goal of mine is to establish that and create the respective department to work with all relevant departments this year.
And I just added kind of creating a branch under DPW for
Facilities,
facilities
yep.
also.
Yep.
And how that would look. Again, if we're making the commitment to town buildings, I think we need to make a commitment to the facilities as well.
Just thinking about outdoor facilities, would that fall under this facilities?
Yeah, so facilities, kind of in most municipal government includes the facilities and kind of grounds, like dream grounds, if you will. So as of right now, you'll see Mark on a tractor, you'll see some other folks that end up kind of doing facilities work on tractors, mowing fields, things like that. So I think the intent would be maybe to allocate those resources to kind of committed facilities and grounds crews, if you will.
But even things like the ball fields, like that
Oh, yeah.
kind of maintenance?
Yep. And just, there's some partnership opportunities as well with the school district. Like they have dedicated facilities crews, so ways that we can partner up on that. So, I don't know how realistic, I think it's a good goal. I don't know how realistic it is this year to fully establish that, but maybe we can kind of create the concept first by partnering, maybe for example with the schools. And then saying, it's working.
Yeah.
Maybe we can fully do that in another year or so. I don't know, we'll see. But it's a good idea. And that's what I have for some of my ideas. There's a lot there, I know, but happy to take any thoughts.
From the board, I think we kind of, as you went through, added and whatever, but is there anything kind of that the board feels strongly about as far as missing that we think is a priority for the administrator for this upcoming fiscal year.
I think, I mean, we kind of talked about it, and it might fall under the whole employee personnel folders, but I think just really making sure that just employee documentation in general is happening, and, you know, whether it's the annual performance evaluations or anything else that needs to be. I know Annalie's been doing a lot of work with all of that, but just making sure that
Yeah,
we have that paper trail for
sure. Yeah,
everything.
yeah. The good and the not so good too, right? Like Tamika's point about the smart, what is it? Smart file? Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
And I think also being mindful of any, like, we've had over the course of the year, some of it was budget driven, some of it was other opportunity driven, but there's been staff turnover, and why has there been staff turnover, and what can we do to, whether it's morale, whether it's a compensation piece, whether it's a job description, whatever, whether it's a relationship piece with the position that, with whom they need to work or whatever, what is driving that turnover? And
Is Ally doing exit interviews or anything?
Yeah, she offers it, it's obviously not required, but for the handful of employees that have left, they have had that option.
There's something also that, maybe just because my company's starting to talk about these things, but they're considering stay interviews. You know, what's your motivation for staying?
Oh.
What's, you know,
Interesting.
yeah. If they were considering leaving, what could we do to get you to stay? Type things.
Kind of like the mic issue,
Not necessarily being able to accommodate, per se,
Moriarty.
but just,
kind of like Moriarty issue, where he was looking for another position.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, no, I mean, earlier on,
Oh,
you had mentioned something about they were looking for no, Mike's not as far as I know. But, yeah, no, because we had a regional, we're mentioning something about that a while, I don't know, half an hour ago.
it's been a while, I probably need a slice of pizza to remember that, but,
Okay.
yeah, no, that's a great idea, I
it's
remember
just
that,
a
yeah.
concept, yeah, just.
Yeah, because I think for a long time, it used to be kind of the municipal piece was the driving force, was kind of the benefits and everything.
Right.
And some of that has changed a little bit, or
Yeah.
as private industry has caught up a little bit with
Right.
the
I think
offerings.
it kind of goes in with some of the other things we've been talking about, with just trying to be more proactive in general on anything rather than reactive. You know, if somebody's already decided they're leaving and they've resigned, sure, you can do an exit interview and find out, but can we try and catch these things
Right.
ahead of time, coordinate it with an annual performance evaluation, you know, ask some of those, what are you happy about, what's not going great, just,
Because there is a cost to onboarding, to the constant staff turnover,
Yes.
on onboarding time as well as resources, and so.
well, especially with those positions where, you know, you've got those certain certifications or,
Yeah.
that are required, if we lose those people, they said we can fill those, so.
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure that we're retaining the people that are good and that have the talent?
Does the board have anything, awesome, thank you for kind of coming with the
Yeah.
list already put together, and I think, you know, knowing what your priorities are and where you need support from us as the elected board and as your bosses is very helpful as well. So, going kind of through the comments, I think a lot of the comments in the review are covered through these different pieces. The previous review were covered through these pieces as well, so, I appreciate that.
Thank you, guys.
The only comment I'd say, and I don't want to hold this up, is that if we're looking at people who are leaving after they've been here a while, I would be interested in hearing why certain people are leaving committees, boards, after they've been around for 15 years, 10 years. What's the reason they're leaving? You know? Because, I mean, if you're an employee, that's a paid position, but if you're a board or you're on a committee, you're showing up with no pay, no thankfulness.
That's interesting,
Yeah.
Mary, yeah.
And why after all this time are you leaving?
Well,
You
not
know.
even, maybe not even after 10 years, what if they've only been
That's
on
what
a
I'm
year
saying.
and they've
Right.
just decided maybe it's just not a fit for them, maybe they wanna do it, but yeah, if there's a means of, I don't know, how, you know, maybe that's further discussion.
Probably have to be voluntary, but as long as they know it's available.
So-
Yeah.
Well, I kind of view that as a board opportunity to do that, right? Especially if they're appointed by the board.
Yeah,
I think you guys have done it, previous boards have done it in the past where they had, I don't want to add to like your night meetings to go to, but they have almost sort of like liaisons that are responsible for different boards and commissions. You know, you think about if you have a structure like that, so for example, let's say Harry, if you're responsible for the Council on Aging and the Concom, and you see a Concom member that leaves, maybe there's an opportunity for you to meet with that member and say, exactly kind of what you mentioned, right?
Hey, Bill, what's going on?
Yeah, yeah.
bring it back to the board.
Yeah,
Right.
because, you know,
Because I mean, it's hard to get people to volunteer,
Yeah.
and it's important to understand why they're not.
yeah, so maybe that could be a select
But,
board.
Yeah, I kind of like that concept, Harry.
Yeah. Good.
I run into a situation, something similar, because what happens is, okay, all of a sudden now, the kids have gotten to the ages of where they're getting involved in sports and this sort of thing. And so working evenings is not conducive to being with their families and taking part in whatever events the kids want to get into.
I got two that do that. It's hard to juggle.
Oh, I understand, I mean, you know, it's one of these things, but, okay, so, you know, and I've heard, you know, there are people who come up and talk to me about, okay, you know, come to work for cable and so on and so forth, and then when they find out it's mostly evening work,
Yeah.
oh, okay, you know, they have family involvements, and it's totally understandable, but, you know, it's a big problem, for me anyways.
So is there anything else kind of from a TA perspective or a board perspective? I don't think, tonight was not meant to have any votes, it was really supposed to be kind of a workshop, and everything, and then, like I said, we'll compile everything and bring it before, one of our regular scheduled meetings hopefully within the next month, for a formal vote, for adoption, and then we can communicate them to the ballots.
No, Lee already said, but thank you for coming up with the list of goals here. I mean, I trust you to kind of have a 360 view of everything that's going on and kind of where the priorities with you as the town administrator, where you feel things need to go. So, I don't have, speaking for myself personally, I don't feel like I have the capacity to know where a lot of these things should be focused on, what a lot of that focus should be. So I very much appreciate your expertise and your identification of these priority areas. And I will, as a board member, support those, the direction that you want to go this year, so.
Thank you. What it really should have done was like stuff that I know we're going to accomplish within the next like week or so. Just put a bunch of stuff, show up to work on Friday, there you go. But no, thank you, Jen, I appreciate it.
And I just want to reiterate to the board that we all have access to Austin and everything. So if there's any questions or concerns or anything, don't feel like you need to hold it or whatever. Stop in and talk to him, make an appointment, whatever. I really want to stress the kind of open communication piece, because that's the only way that we're all going to feel comfortable with any of our concerns. And so some stuff definitely is a board concern or whatever, but some stuff can just be a, hey, I have a question about this, or, you know, can you explain this to me, or have you thought of this, or whatever. So I just want to reiterate that for all of us.
Actually, if I wanted an answer, I'd go to Tamika.
She's the keeper of the knowledge.
I'm Austin's gatekeeper, so you go first, and then
There you go.
So is there any other business to come before the board? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, roll call.
That's what I.
Second,
Ledger I.
Wait, 9:12.